Hello friends, this is your friend back with a new fanfic. What if Naruto was a godlike true Uzumaki with a massive harem? Episode 5. If you like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Now, Naruto's journey as a true Uzumaki is reaching a critical turning point, and the powers hidden within his bloodline are beginning to awaken on a level that could shake the entire Shinobi world. Now, let's start. Both Kakashi and Naruto face planted into the ground, both hyped to fight but then stopped just like that. Getting back up they both looked to who had stalled the fight, Anko. "Why did you stop us, Anko-chan?" Naruto asked, rubbing his head after it met the ground. Anko grinned, because the rest of the audience isn't here yet. Both Naruto and Kakashi blinked. "Audience," they both said in unison only for Anko to grin and nod. "What, you don't think others would want to see this fight too?" "I invited guests," she smiled as they sensed multiple presences incoming to the area before multiple figures arrived in multiple shunshuns. Both teams 8 and 10 arrived, followed by half a dozen Anbu and Hokage along with each member of the Shinobi Council minus the civilian side. Ibiki as well as half a dozen T and I Shinobi. Hayate arrived also. Sum had Hana with her, each rubbed the back their heads sheepishly. Hiruzen coughed, "Sorry, are we late?" Both Kakashi and Naruto sweat dropped seeing they now had a rather big audience watching on. Anko just grinned, "Nope, just in time, now let's get this show on the road guys. Place your bets," she said as she pulled out a hanging table and started to go round each person taking bets as Naruto and Kakashi's sweat drops just grew. Naruto shook his head, "This is going overboard," he said with a sigh as Kakashi just chuckled. 500 on Naruto, put me 1,000, I want 100 on Kakashi, the bets started to be called out. Short time skip. After all the bets had been taken, everyone was gathered as Naruto and Kakashi took their stances again as the air began to get tense. Kakashi pulled up his headband right away and his Sharingan eye opened. Naruto's right hand came up into the ram half sigh and he smirked. "Kai," he said as his seals released and his left hand went to his storage seal on his wrist. Kakashi moved first, not eager to give Naruto the chance to build chakra to attack. He pulled his kunai and went to pin Naruto quickly. However, Naruto was used to fighting at Jonin speeds. He saw Kakashi coming to attack and he moved accordingly, catching Kakashi's wrist and stooping low he used Kakashi's weight and speed against him, throwing him overhead and he jumped away, but Kakashi was right back on him with a mid-air spinning kick aimed for his head. Naruto got to the wrist on his seal just in time to pull out his staff and block the kick. The force, however, sent him skidding back. The result looked like they both had swapped positions and pulled their weapons. The crowd was watching eagerly as things were getting started. They were watching as both squared off after the first attack had been thrown and each was making their own opinions on the fight's possible outcome. "Damn, that was some fast thinking on Naruto's part. Not many genin can move at that speed," said Asuma Sarutobi to his father as they watched the match. Asuma was a tall man, with brown eyes, olive skin, short black spiky hair, and a beard. His attire consisted of the standard Konoha shinobi attire, black short trousers with wrappings around his lower legs and feet wearing open-toed shinobi sandals. He wore the green shinobi flat jacket and had his sleeves rolled up halfway. Around his waist however he wore a gray sash with the kanji for fire on it, signifying his serves as one of the fire daimyo's guards. Hiruzen nodded to his son's speculations. Naruto's skills have advanced to those far beyond his years. A testament to his many years of training. As it stands, this test is only a formality. He'll be a genin either way. Troublesome. Guess who said that Naruto always has to show off? Why can't he ever do something simple for a change? Okay, it was Shikamaru who sighed. "Munch, oh come on Munch, you gotta admit he's Munch putting on a good show," Choji said as he munched on a bag of potato chips. "Woo, go Naruto-kun." Ino cheered. Shikamaru shook his head again, troublesome blondes. With the Inuzukas, the three of them were watching with grins. Alright, get Naruto, show that Cyclops how it's done, Kiba yelled. Soon grinned, he's in for one hell of a fight taking on Kakashi. This is going to be fun to watch. Hana grinned, yay, but we all know who's going to come out on top of this one, Naruto's got this in the bag. Soon smirked at her, damn right he is, I've got 10,000 Ryo on him. Both Naruto and Kakashi were sizing each other up again as they watched the others' moments. This time it was Naruto's turn to attack. He shot at Kakashi with high Jonin speed and swung for his midsection with his staff. Kakashi jumped out of the way to avoid the attack and went in for a stab. Naruto saw it coming and used his staff to intercept before pushing it to the side and spinning the staff up, going for Kakashi's jaw, who only tilted his head slightly, avoiding the end just narrowly as he threw a left hook at Naruto, who saw it coming, but in a blur of speed he disappeared before it could connect and reappeared in a blur of speed behind Kakashi with a victorious smirk on his face as he swung his staff at Kakashi's midsection once more. Kakashi saw him appear again just in time to move his left arm in to block the hit, but the impact made his eyes widen before he was sent flying and crashed into a tree and then through it, only to come skidding to a halt, winching in from the pain of the attack and landing. The audience was looking wide-eyed at the scene, as Kakashi came out of the trees rubbing his forearm. That's some weapon you've got, packs one hell of a punch, Kakashi said as he flexed his arm. Naruto grinned, thanks, just testing this beauty out today. As much as I'd love to explain how it works, it's a clan secret and I've already had one stolen by your new student, so I'm not going to be sharing openly, sorry. Kakashi smirked under his mask, no need, I know some fuinjutsu myself. Weight and gravity seals at the end right makes the swings pack one hell of a punch, but it will take much more than that if you're going to beat me. Just means I'll fight long range, Kakashi said as he started running through hand signs before taking a breath and calling his attack, Suiten no Jutsu, water release, water bullet, he called out as he sent a spear of water at Naruto, who just smirked. And who says you're safe over there? Naruto grinned before he spun his staff and grinned before slashing the air as his staff glowed blue. Uzumaki Suiten, Heigashi Surashu, Uzumaki water release. Torrential slash, he said before sending a screaming slash of water at the water bullet. It was over 7 feet tall and left a deep gash on the ground as it traveled before meeting the water bullet head on, before cutting right through it and continued on. Kakashi jumped out of the way as the blade passed him and into the tree line behind before cutting a tree right down the middle. Kakashi took a second to admire the damage before focusing right back on Naruto. Why couldn't I have had you on my team instead of that Uchiha? At least your attacks are on target and not erratic. Naruto smirked. Sorry, I already have a hot sensei, he said, which earned a, damn right you do, yell from Enko in the crowd. Naruto just shook his head before spinning his staff again and grinned. Now let's continue, shall we? Uzumaki Suiten, Nami no Heigashi Surashu Shogeki, Uzumaki water release. Torrential slash, bombardment of the waves, he called out before half a dozen blades of water traveled at Kakashi, who avoided each of them as he moved towards Naruto, figuring close combat was safer than his long-range attacks. Seeing Kakashi approaching him, Naruto moved to meet him as they started sparring again, as Kakashi avoided his swings. I see your staff can also be used in conjunction with your Uzumaki jutsu. I take it's made of Uzumaki chakra metal then, Kakashi speculated as he narrowly avoided another swing at his head. Correct, Kakashi-san, it is, which means only I can touch and use it. I figured it to be safer that way, Naruto responded as he caught a straight right from Kakashi and pushed him back as he spun his staff again, this time as it changed its form, making itself thinner and longer as a blade formed at the end and changed into a spear, much to the shock of all watching, as Kakashi was hard-pressed not to gape at the sudden change as he started to avoid the thrusts from the new spear. Avoiding a final thrust, Kakashi rolled to the side and quickly started weaving hand signs before attacking. Kaiten. Gokaku no Jutsu, Fire Release. Great Fireball, he called, sending a medium-size fireball at Naruto, who narrowed his eyes and he thrust his spear into it. Uzumaki Futon. Tatsumaki Yari, Uzumaki Wind Release. Tornado Spear, he called out as the fireball was rammed and in a second broke apart by a blast of air which continued and hit Kakashi head-on, only to have him poof out of existence, leaving a log as Naruto started looking for his opponent, only for his eyes to widen as he heard Kakashi's voice. Doten. Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu, Earth Release. Headhunter Jutsu, he called as Naruto suddenly felt his ankles get grabbed and he was pulled under the ground, leaving just his head above as Kakashi emerged from the ground with a smirk under his mask. Well, it was a good try, but this fight looks to be over. Naruto smirked. You think so, do you? You should never underestimate your opponent, Kakashi-san, he said as Kakashi's eyes widened as the ground started to shake as all of a sudden a pillar of earth rose up, lifting Naruto out of the ground. Uzumaki Doten. Sanmyaku no Sakusei, Uzumaki Earth Style. Mountain Range Creation, he called as Kakashi started to backflip as he sensed the chakra and pillar after pillar of earth came out of the ground after him as he avoided them all before skidding to a halt after 30 meters. Kakashi took a second to get his breath back, not expecting to have to avoid such an onslaught of jutsu, as he stood up with a smirk. Well, this certainly is a surprise. You very well versed in jutsu. I think it's time I showed one of my own, Kakashi said as he started to run through his hand signs before his hand burst into lightning. Chidori. 1,000 birds, he called out as he sprinted back in the direction he just came from, the current cutting through the stone pillars as he went until he reached the last on and ran it through just like the other. With the pillar broken, Naruto jumped into the air and started to fall above the earth. Thinking fast, he threw his staff into the air and started channeling chakra into his hands. Uzumaki Kaiten. Kasai Hakushu no Jutsu, Uzumaki Fire Release. Fire Clap, Naruto called out as he aimed the fire at the ground, slowing his descent as he landed on the ground, which was now scorched from the fire. Naruto spun around to see Kakashi coming out of the dust cloud from the rubble as his Chidori faded, breathing heavily a little from the overuse of chakra on multiple jutsu. Naruto smirked and brought his hand up as he slipped into his personal fighting stance and gave a "bring it" gesture to the Jonin, who smirked under his mask and ran at Naruto as they both started into a taijutsu spar. Naruto holding back on the power but not speed as he attacked Kakashi with a flurry of kicks to his midsection and chest. Kakashi deflected as best he could before he started his own attack as Naruto dodged. Not so easy without your weapon, is it? Kakashi asked, thinking he finally had an advantage to press, only to be put off by the smirk Naruto had. And who says throwing it away was a mistake? Naruto said before he swooped down low and swiped Kakashi's feet out from under him as he raised his hand up, and in a poof of smoke the staff was back in his hand before he brother it down on Kakashi, who narrowly avoided the blow. A summoning seal, that is quite the troublesome weapon you have, Kakashi said as he got an "Oi, that's our line" from the father and son Nara. Is there anything it can't do? Kakashi asked while sweat dropping from the Nara comment. Naruto grinned. Well, I don't think it can make ramen very well, but I only just got it and have yet to try it out, he joked before he spun the spear again, this time changing it into a double-bladed katana. Kakashi chuckled nervously seeing the weapon and his eyes widened seeing the lighting starting to course through it, but before Naruto could attack, Kakashi raised his hand. I forfeit, he called out, making all the spectators who voted for him fall flat on their faces while Sume fist pumped the air in victory and a huge payday. Naruto pouted in annoyance as he lowered his weapon. Damn, and I was really looking forward to trying that jutsu out in a fight, he said with a sigh. Yugaone and Hayate-sensei never let me use it on them. Hayate coughed in the audience with a smirk on his face, clearly having bet on Naruto. With good reason. No one can dodge lighting. Kakashi just didn't want to take the full brunt of your attack. Not that I'm complaining, he said as he started counting his winnings while half the Anbu were weeping to the side, except for Neiko who was also counting her winnings. Yahoo! Soon grinned holding up her winnings in 2 big bags, thanked Kami for stupid betting Anbu. She yelled, getting nods of agreement from the other heads as they put away their winnings. Ibiki nodded, I still can't believe they bet against his skills after the amount of times he's been able to prank them, he said putting away his winnings into his coat. Ibiki was a tall man with 2 very noticeable scars on his face, one from his left temple down past his left eyes and through his lips, the second was on his right side just below his right eye to under his right ear. He wore a bandana headband in dark blue covering his head, the rest of his attire was all gray, with a black tall collar overcoat and metal back-plated gloves. Hiruzen took a breath from his pipe and exhaled, well I guess that's that then, Anko does he pass your test? Anko grinned, well the fight was good but I don't know if he passed the actual test or not because I didn't see him do it which means it could have happened so let's check, she said as the turn to Naruto getting a look of confusion from the rest of the audience, Foxy-kun, did you get it? Naruto smirked with a nod as he reached into his coat. Flashback back in the ceiling room under Hokage Tower. Anko grinned like mad. Okay, so as your test we'll see about pairing you up with Kakashi Hatake. I know how much you like a challenge, and it doesn't get much more challenging than him unless you're facing one of the Sannin. Naruto grinned also. Perfect, I really want to see how I stack up to him, plus I want to see how my staff fares in a straight fight. Anko nodded, yes but winning the fight is only the secondary objective. In order to pass my test there is a task you must perform that no other has been able to do, and you must do it without Hatake realizing you've done it. During the fight, you must steal. Flashback end. And pulled out a little orange book making the audience blink. A few of the women in the crowd were glaring at the book and releasing killing intent, wanting to destroy it, but their attention was drawn when Kakashi started checking his pockets and pouch before quickly grabbing the book. Giving the one-word question, when? Naruto smirked, when I used my speed that time, I was able to swipe it then before showing myself again. I moved so fast you likely didn't even register it, and if I can move fast enough to steal your book I was already fast enough to land a crucial blow even with your Sharingan active. Kakashi said in recognition as he opened the book to take a quick read. Kakashi quit being such a perv, reading smut in public is disgraceful, spoke a woman who Naruto recognized, Kurenai Yuhi, one of Anko's 2 best friends. She was a fair-skinned woman of slender build, with long black untamed hair reaching her upper back. Her unique blood-red eyes always set her apart from everyone and made her stand out in a crowd. Her regular outfit consisted of a red mesh armor blouse with only the right sleeve visible. The rest of her body was covered in loose material which resembled bandages with a pattern on it similar to those of rose thorns. Her hands and upper thighs are also wrapped in bandages and she wears the Konoha forehead protector and regular shinobi sandals. Naruto just shook his head hearing her tone. Oh, and where should he read it then, Kurenai-chan? In his bedroom like you do. He called out as Kurenai turned beet red at his words. What's the matter, Kurenai-chan? There's nothing to be embarrassed about. I actually took a little peek at the sale records for those books in the village and majority of them were actually bought by women, even Anko has her set. Yep, read them 3 times already, and proud of it. Anko said, taking out one of her own. So if you're calling Kakashi a pervert for reading it out in public, I've got one thing to say, he's a grown man and can do whatever the hell he wants. That included reading what he wants and not you or anyone else can tell him otherwise. Unless you're his wife or dating him, that's when he kind of has to listen. Naruto reasoned as the majority of females there were still blushing at the fact that mostly women bought those books. Kakashi just put his hand on Naruto's shoulder with a small tear in his visible eye. Thanks for that, Naruto. Naruto nodded as Anko started to clear her throat as she took in a breath to yell. All right, get back to your lives, people show over, come on, the author can't continue the scene with all you guys here, come on shoes, get back to your positions. Anko started yelling as she shooed the spectators away, each of them sweat dropping at the blatant breaking of the fourth wall in the script. Anko then turned back to Naruto and Kakashi and gave them the thumbs up to go. Scene break. The three of them walked back to the posts where Sakura and Sasuke were still tied up and Sai was just sitting on top of the third reading a scroll. So Kakashi, how'd your team do? They passed your infamous belt test. Anko asked with a smirk. Belt test? Naruto asked looking to her. Anko nodded. It's a teamwork test of sorts. The conditions pit the whole team against each other and the objective is to see if they can overcome those conditions and work as a team to complete the objective, in this case, to work together to get the bells off Kakashi. So how'd they do? Kakashi sighed. In a word, horrible, he said in defeat. That bad him? Naruto asked, feeling sorry for the dude getting saddled with the emo prick and his pet monkey. Kakashi nodded. Yeah, but I've got no choice but to pass them this time, my hands are tied. Why's that pressure to train the Uchiha? Anko asked. You could propose to fail the team and take him for private lessons, no sense wasting your time on his pet fangirl. Kakashi nodded. I wish I could, but I've got to pass the whole team. There are certain conditions in play that I can't risk failing them. What are you talking about, Kakashi? Naruto asked in a serious tone, not liking how he sounded. Kakashi just handed him an envelope, and inside was a high-grade explosive tag made of a dud and Naruto's eyes opened wide. Explosives. Kakashi nodded. I found that under my door yesterday morning along with several others dotted around places I visit. All duds like that one, but the threat is real. Either I pass this team or I risk whoever is behind them setting off real ones. Anko scowled. Have you reported this to Hokage-sama? Kakashi shook his head. I couldn't risk it. If someone saw me go to him right after finding the tags, they could blow them just to spite me. Naruto closed his eyes and tried to think as he nodded in understanding, as a plan started to form in his head. Alright Kakashi, tell me exactly where you found each of those tags, and anywhere else you visit that might be a target. We'll go from there, and don't worry, I've got a plan. Kakashi nodded as he looked at Naruto with some speculation as he began to tell Naruto about the tags' locations. Naruto nodded. Alright, got it, he said before crossing his hands in the familiar sign, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He called out, creating the exact number of clones for the job. You all know where to go. Position yourselves at each location and be on watch for any chakra spikes. Tags of that size take 10 seconds before detention, so you'll have 10 seconds each to deactivate them before they go off. We can do this now, go, he called as his clones took off at high speed. They were so busy talking they didn't notice Sai jotting down the locations on his scroll and the details turning into a small ink mouse and scurrying away into the tree line as a report message to Danzo on the situation. Naruto then created a final clone. You go tell Gigi what's going on, tell him the plan and call for a meeting. Something tells me the civilians' counselors are behind this for their precious Uchiha. Dispel once done and you have your response. The clone nodded and took off in a shunshin as Naruto pulled out a kunai. Come on, let's untie these two. Everyone will have to be present at this meeting, or they'll be called to be questioned at some point. Better to bring them than have to waste an ANBU's time coming here to collect them. Kakashi nodded as he went to untie Sakura while Naruto got Sasuke. As they were untying them, Naruto's eyes went out of focus for a second as he got the memories from his messenger clone. Alright, Gigi's calling the meeting, and he's informed why and he's not happy. Something tells me this is going to be the bloodiest meeting yet. Anko looked at him with a smirk, even more so than the last one with 3 civilians dead. Naruto nodded. I wouldn't be surprised if he just lined them all up and ran a kunai across their throats after the state my clone left him in. The meeting's in 10 minutes, come on, let's go, he finished as he hoisted Sasuke on his back, and Kakashi did the same to Sakura as the group of them shined away. Scene break. Arriving just outside the meeting room, Kakashi and Naruto put the emo and his pet fangirl on 2 seats by the door, guarded either side by 2 Anbu, one in a hawk mask and the other in a rabbit. The hawk looked to them. Kakashi-senpai, you are to wait out here with your genin. Naruto can go in, will you be accompanying him, Anko? The hawk Anbu spoke. Kakashi nodded as he and Sai sat down, and Anko and Naruto moved to the door. Yes, she will be, Naruto responded as the hawk nodded and opened the door for them to enter. Coming into the meeting room, they saw that only a few had arrived. Hiruzen was sitting in his spot as he was desperately trying to rein in his ki. He was so enraged he could barely control himself. The others here were Hiashi and Sum on the clan side, both of whom were very weary of the ki Hiruzen leaking, as both were wondering just what the meeting was about. On the civilian side there were just a few of the lesser councilmen seated, but they were frozen on the spot from Hiruzen ki not even noticing Naruto and Anko enter. As they took their seats beside Sum, she looked to Naruto with a worried look. Naruto, what's going on? I've never seen Hokage-sama this pissed off before a meeting. Naruto shook his head. That's because there has never been this level of arrogance and stupidity involved before. Someone has crossed the line and something big is going to happen. Care to enlighten that statement, Naruto? Hayashi asked, overhearing their conversation. Naruto nodded. Someone, likely a civilian fool, has tried to sway the Uchiha's Genin team sensei's decisions by using tactics that are, in a word, traitorous. Planting fake explosive tags where the Jonin sensei frequents is a threat and proof that they can plan real ones. When I found out, I sent a clone to inform Gigi about it, and the result is as you see. Both Sum and Hiashi scowled, hearing that, as both started leaking ki at the civilian side. Naruto shook his head. No, the tags were made with regular ink, not chakra laces, so they're just duds, and thus there's no way to trace them to their creator. That's why I've sent shadow clones to each location to search for and deactivate the tags should they go off. I know how to create the tags myself, so I know how to defuse them without blowing half the village up in the process. This meeting is the confrontation where the probable culprits are going to be. The aim is to get whoever it is to make the mistake and try to activate the tags. As soon as everyone is here, Hokage-sama will activate a ceiling barrier locking everyone in and preventing the tags activation. I have my clones out in the locations the fake tags were found. They are set to deactivate any tags they find, so we can identify the dumb bastard responsible for this mess. Both Sum and Hiashi nodded in understanding. It was a risky move, but if it paid off, they'd have the fool, and a mind walk from Inoichi would reveal just who was behind this stupidity and stuff it out. Time skip. Slowly but surely each counselor arrived. All were new ones after their visits with Ibiki. The clan heads arriving first, each looking somewhat worried by the ki the Hokage was leaking, but as they arrived the information was passed on as to why they were here, and soon each of them were glaring at the civilian side, adding their own ki to the mix as well at what was clearly a threat to the village's safety. As the last of the civilian counselors came in and sat down, they froze stiff in their seats, feeling the ki from the other occupants of the room, each shivering slightly. As soon as the last civilian was seated, Hiruzen stood up from his seat. Anbu, bring those outside in immediately. The two Anbu at the door nodded with an "hi" before bringing in Kakashi, Sai and the still unconscious emo and his pet. Of course, seeing their state, the civilians erupted into chaos. What happened to Sasuke-sama? Someone get him to a medic. How could you allow this to happen to him? They all started yelling, only for Hiruzen to boil over. Enough! Hiruzen yelled. You will all be silent, or I will execute every single one of you for treason, for crimes against the Hokage and village. The counselors immediately shut up except for one stupid banshee. What happened to my daughter? Screamed Counselor Haruno before she started into a rant as everyone held their ears from her screaming. Hiruzen glared at her only for him to form a ram sigh and channel his chakra, activating her seal, toning down her voice till it was normal levels before speaking. Haruno, you will shut up or I will have your head mounted on a pike outside of the village gates as a warning to all banshee kind to shut the hell up. The counselor immediately shut up and sat down as Hiruzen ran through a series of hand signs before he placed his hand on the table. Fuinjutsu. Sengeto. Fuinjutsu. 1000 gates, he called out as the sound of gates all around the room were heard closing as a purple aura shone around the room before fading. No one leaves this room until this meeting is over. Danzo looked to Hiruzen with a serious look, knowing just what had angered him but maintaining his incise cover, spoke up. Hokage-sama, just what is going on here? Hiruzen looked to Naruto, who had his eyes shut but opened the next second before looking to Hiruzen with a nod, and he nodded back before speaking. We have a traitor in our midst and one whose time is up. Shikaku Nara usually took these meetings as a chance to catch up on his sleep, since his wife usually kept him awake at home or he had to cope with the enemy of Kage and clan heads, the dreaded Jigoku Kara no Jimyu Shori, or in English paperwork from hell. But it didn't look like he'd be able to do that this meeting. He'd heard the possible topic of this meeting from his fellow clan heads, and if the level of Ki the Hokage was letting off was any indication, it was true, but he was wanting some clarification. Hokage-sama, just what exactly is going on? Why was this meeting called? He asked in a polite tone, not wanting to risk angering the Hokage further than the civilians obviously already had done. With his scowl still set, Hiruzen replies, an outside source has been trying to manipulate a Jonin sensei's decision on team selections and forcing the Jonin to pass their team by planting fake explosive notes at various locations in the village. Inoichi, who was glaring at the civilian side after hearing the situation from Naruto, also spoke up, and you have reason to believe that the one or ones responsible are in this room now. He spoke, his scowl deepening. This new civilian council is bolder than the last bunch, but this is just insane. This is known for a fact. Naruto speaks up from his seat, drawing the attention of all in the room, glares mostly from the civilian side. And how is this so, Uzumaki Dono? Shibi Aburame asked from his position. Naruto looked at Hiruzen. May I present the evidence of Hokage-sama? Naruto asked for a nod. He stood up and walked to the middle of the room where two Anbu appeared from a shunshin holding a table, before disappearing the same way. Naruto reached into his trench coat pocket, taking out the envelope. Naruto opened it and presented the fake explosive tag and laid it out on the table. This was the explosive tag that one Jonin sensei, Hitaki Kakashi, presented me with when informing me of the threats made should he not pass his team. Upon examination, I was able to tell multiple things about the tag, the first of which is that the ink it was made with was not chakra ink or the type of ink that explosive tags are, which allow them to store chakra for their explosive use. It is simple plain ink. The next thing I was able to tell was that it wasn't purchased in a shop. Even if it was for display purposes, there would be a small serial number on the back with the shop ID number at the end to trace it back to where it was purchased. Which led me to believe that this wasn't purchased but made by hand. After I determined that, I looked to the design in the explosive array. Contrary to most beliefs, not all explosive tags are the same. There are variations in the notes designs. Usually they change every few generations when a better design was created. We have the research divisions and foreign villages to thank for that. And by looking at the design, I was able to tell just what array the person was following when they made it. The design on this tag, while made with high-grade skills obviously reigned over many years of practice, is also extremely outdated by several generations of tags that have been discovered in the past 20 years. You see, the flaw in this design is that while it is fluid and quick to make, it is also venerable to someone like me who knows the Fuinjutsu language back to front. And by simply altering the array with an overpowering ink concoction, it becomes inactive and unusable, Naruto said before smirking as he got his clone's memories back. which my clones throughout the village have just demonstrated by doing so with each explosive note they have found at each location. These ones were live and were set to detonate with the creator's chakra signature flared, which means they each had a sample of the maker's chakra in them, and since I've been monitoring all chakra signatures since entering this room, I can confirm the traitor is present. Soon smirked, so you were on the lookout for them from the very start. So it's an older Fuinjutsu user or someone who has knowledge enough to make the tags from that generation. Correct. My clones have now all fully dispelled and I have a perfect sample of the maker's chakra already extracted from the tags for the final piece of evidence, and I've been sensing the source of it since they first sat down. Isn't that right, Counselor Homura? Naruto said as he leveled his gaze on the glaring elder. Anbu. Hiruzen yelled only to have two Anbu drop down, restraining the counselor and pinning him to the desk with his hands behind his back as a third appeared at the front of him holding a ninjutsu to the back of his neck ready to execute him on orders. Kaharu rose to her feet. What is the meaning of this? You'd believe that brat over your old teammates? She asked, outraged at seeing Homura restrained. Hiruzen settled a glare on his former female teammate. Silence, Kaharu. You know as well as I that Homura is well versed in Fuinjutsu of that caliber, and as far as believing goes, I'd believe the word of one of my shinobi sooner than I would yours on this subject. The chakra signature is all the proof I need. Homura looked at Hiruzen from his pinned position. He's lying, Hiruzen, don't let that demon fool you. Hiruzen glared at his pinned former teammate in rage. That's Hokage-sama to you, counselor. You have disappointed me greatly. Above all, you have such expertise in Fuinjutsu, yet you can still not tell the difference between the kunai and its scroll, even after that kunai was proven to be used against its own will. Anbu, take him to Ibiki and tell him level 4 methods of information extraction are approved, but he is to be kept alive. His execution will be in 1 week for treason, he said as he cancelled the barrier and the Anbu disappeared with a shocked and fearful Homura restrained and bound. Komura looked at Hiruzen with shock. Hiruzen, you can't be serious, he's our team, she started but was silenced when Hiruzen glared at her once more. I said silence, counselor, another word from you and you will be joining him. The only reason you aren't in the same position for your crimes against the clans of Konoha is due to Naruto's leniency and mercy on you, and your position as voice for the Uchiha clan on non-crucial matters, but the second one can be easily revoked. You have already lost a third of your estate for your crimes against the Uzumaki clan, and with the former counselor now to be executed, the remaining third of his estate will be as well. Now for the last time, sit down and be silent. Hiruzen roared in his anger, releasing his ki in full on his former teammate who looked scared out of her mind. Fearing her former teammate's wrath, Komura sat down trembling as Hiruzen's ki subsided. Now that the main issue has been dealt with, let us review the results of the last meeting's orders, Hiruzen said as he calmed himself. Inoichi, how are the interrogations going? Inoichi leant forward on his table. With the sheer number of cases that we have to deal with, I've had to call in all currently active T and I Yamanaka who are still working even now. Out of the currently active 20 we are processing as fast as we can. 900 mind walks have been completed, with over 98% have committed secondary offenses, 80% did it a second time, 70% a third, and over half did it more than that. As a request from the Uzumaki head, which is too generous if you ask me, only half of their estates have been confiscated for their crimes, with any revenue above a listed amount for the next 5 years will be paid as continuous punishment, and the amounts already confiscated will be going to a registered account to pay for the construction of the new Uzumaki compound once the plans have been finalized. Hiruzen nodded. 50% is far too generous indeed, but it is Naruto's decision. Now, as all clan heads can clearly see and as I'm sure all civilian counselors are aware, the civilian council has been emptied, all aside from Counselor Haruno, for their crimes against the Uzumaki clan. I'd advise those of you who were recently appointed to not follow your predecessors' examples. Hiruzen said as he leveled a glare on them. Any such attempt to do so, Be warned now, I will not be as lenient as I have been in the past and will deal with you accordingly. The new counselors cowered under the Hokage's gaze, and the older pink banshee kept her mouth shut, not wanting to risk the Hokage making good on his earlier threat. Hiruzen sat back on his chair. On the last note from the last meeting, after the extra request on the interrogation was given, former Counselor Homura and Counselor Komura were discovered to be the ones behind the theft of the Uzumaki Canton Jutsu. The funds have already been removed as payment for their crimes, same of the Uchiha accounts, and the extra 3 jutsu have been delivered to Naruto as per the payment. However, I would see Counselor Komura in my office after this to allow her an explanation for her actions on this matter. Soon growled slightly, with all due respect Hokage-sama, what reason could that bitch possibly give that would justify her crimes? Why don't you just remove her and be done with it? Hiruzen sighed, there's no reason she could give, but it will help me to determine if her reasons were traitorous or if she was just completely foolish to decide what further actions to take, and as I have already said, she is the last voice for the Uchiha clan on non-critical matters. It's in the charted every clan must have a voice, and until Sasuke Uchiha is of age or chooses another, she is that voice. On top of which, with Homura's removal, the Elder Council is down a member to remove her after a new civilian side has been chosen would throw off the balance of the sides in any matters that require a vote, so killing her is not an option at this moment, though that can be changed should her reasons for her crimes prove traitorous instead of foolish. Taking his opportunity, Danzo cleared his throat. Hokage-sama, might I request myself be present for this meeting? I am also curious as to Komura's reasoning as well. Hiruzen paused for a moment before nodding. Very well Danzo, but just you and no one else. Danzo nodded, accepting the terms. Hiruzen sat back, looked around the room. Are there any other matters that wish to be brought up? Surprisingly, Shikaku Nara spoke. I have a concern I would wish to voice about the first matter of this meeting that has been troubling me as to the former counselor's reasonings as to why he thought it would be necessary to blackmail Kakashi-san on his decision on whether or not his team passed. Hiruzen nodded. Yes, it is indeed troubling as to why he thought this would be required. Perhaps it was simply a precaution, but it's always best to be sure, Hiruzen said before looking to Kakashi. Kakashi, please step forward. Kakashi nodded and moved to the middle of the room. As Hiruzen continued, Kakashi, I assume you've already tested your team. How would you grade their skill, and would they still pass your standards as a genin team? Kakashi sighed. To be plainly blunt about it, Hokage-sama, no, the team is nowhere near any standard of a genin team by my standards. This started to get murmurs from both sides of the room over Kakashi's verdict. Hiruzen frowned. This is most concerning. Kakashi, what would be your gauging of their overall skills, and what was your final reason for failing them? Please detail everything. Kakashi nodded. The kunoichi of the team, if you could even call her that. Genin Haruno is pathetically weak. Her chakra levels are below average for even a first-year academy student. I suspect the only reason she passed her genin test at the academy was for her book smarts, because the written test takes up the larger portion of the passing mark. Her taijutsu is low, she showed no ninjutsu, and her genjutsu was pathetic, on top of which her current mindset is not that of a shinobi or kunoichi, it's that of a teenage fangirl swooning over her precious Uchiha, who she expects to save her in every situation. Next, genin Uchiha. I suspected he might have some trauma from the night of his clan's destruction, but I never expected them to have run so deep. While he shows high genin skills in taijutsu and a strong fire affinity in his ninjutsu, his mindset for a shinobi of this village is atrocious. He is power-hungry and obnoxious. In the test he believed he could take me on in a fight by himself, while he turned down any aid offered to him by his teammates, which was none from genin Haruno. Finally, genin Sai was overall the only workable member of them. He possessed mid to high genin skills in all areas. He was able to detect and dispel my genjutsu, possess relative skill with taijutsu, and uses unique ninjutsu that I have not come across before. And out of all 3 graduates he was the only one of the 3 to actually grasp the hidden meaning to my test, that being teamwork, when he offered assistance to both his to-be teammates, only to have both attempts shot down. In all honesty, I can't understand how the first 2 passed the Academy Psych evaluation or how they were not removed from the program, as in my eyes they are not fit to be Shinobi or Kunoichi. While listening to Kakashi's explanation, Hiruzen had called for both Sasuke's and Sakura's reports and documents from the Academy filing office, and the more he read and listened the deeper his scowl got. Something is wrong here, Hiruzen said as Kakashi finished talking. Both Academy reports and Jonin Sensei's evaluations are conflicting. Genin Haruno's genjutsu capabilities are listed as high and her taijutsu is mid-level genin, and there is no mention of any worries over her current mindset, nor Genin Uchiha, both are ranked second highest in their year. Hokage-sama, during the test I cast the lowest level genjutsu on Genin Haruno. She was unable to detect it and fainted after several seconds. Her attempt at taijutsu was the weakest I've ever seen. A child could fight better throwing toys. And when I pinned her in the test she cried out for her precious Sasuke-kun to come and save her. When it was Genin Sai to save her, instead she verbally lashed out at her other teammate, complaining about trying to upstage Genin Uchiha. On top of this, when she discovered Genin Uchiha after he had been caught by Mai Goten Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu, Earth Release, Headhunter Jutsu, before she promptly fainted. The council members began to mutter about how pathetic the younger Haruno sounded in her test, much to her mother's embarrassment, before Kakashi continued. As for Genin Uchiha's personality problems, after he failed to beat me himself and Genin Sai stepped in to defend him, Genin Uchiha started shouting at him not to get in his way, that as an Uchiha he didn't need help, before coming in to attack again only to be beaten again. And then when Genin Sai took his shot at passing and was almost successful, Genin Uchiha purposefully fouled his attempt with a near-lethal Kaiden attack, and when I confronted him about his actions, his words to me were, "I don't need those weaklings, I'm an Uchiha. I'm the elite, if they're in my way I'll wipe them out no matter who they are," Kakashi said, a scowl forming on his face. And he wasn't the only one. As he finished speaking, the clan heads scowled hearing what the Uchiha has said, and if he had been awake at that moment he would have had every member of the clan side of the council giving him the stink eye and unloading their ki on him. Hiruzen, who was looking over the reports with a troubled gaze, looked up and looked to Naruto. "Naruto, you were in their year, they were your fellow students, were they like this in the academy?" Naruto nodded. "Arrogant, pig-headed, selfish, self-centered, brooding, emo prince with a 50-foot pole, sounds about right for the Uchiha, and a screaming howler monkey of a fangirl who's completely useless at everything else, would describe Haruno perfectly." Naruto listed off as a small smile grew on his face as Sum and Anko started chuckling to themselves at his description of the brooding emo duck and its pet howler monkey. Hiruzen sighed. If that is the case, then why doesn't their psych evaluation reflect this? And why didn't the academy drill it out of them? That's what it is designed to do. If they were unfit there would have been attempts made to rectify the problem, and if not then they would have been removed. Naruto frowned. I'd say it was likely their files were tampered with in areas to make them look good, and if I was a betting man, which I am, my money would be on the previous members of the Civilian Council and the higher-ups in the academy. Boost the Uchiha's grades to make him look better and keeping his mental state under wraps. It wouldn't look good to have the final Uchiha in the village turn out to be someone fit for a straitjacket. Hiruzen nodded. Why do I get the inkling feeling that you are right on this one, Naruto? He said before looking at Kakashi. Kakashi, is there any hope of saving this team? Kakashi rubbed the back of his head. The only workable one is Sai. Both Uchiha and Haruno will need a lot of work in the psychological area. Sasuke broken out of his Avenger mindset and made to see his teammates are there to help and not holding him back. and Sakura needs help all over. I don't think she trained one day outside of the academy, and looking at her overall mental status, she needs to be broken out of her fangirl mindset and build from the ground up again. Hiruzen sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose at the state of these two before nodded. Very well then, for now, Team 7 will have a probationary pass, and I'm ordering weekly psych evaluations of both Genin Uchiha and Genin Haruno. If they show improvement within the first month, I will consider making it an official pass. You have 3 months in all, Kakashi, to make this team functional. If come the Chunin exams they are not to my standard, they will not be allowed to compete. Hearing the declaration, one of the new counselors stood up. Hokage-sama, we can't forbid Uchiha-sama not to compete. He's the last of his clan and we still need to. He started before being silenced by the Hokage's glare. Silence. If Genin Haruno and Genin Uchiha are mentally unfit to be shinobi at a Genin level, then they will not be allowed to participate in the exams, and I will have him removed from the shinobi forces entirely with his chakra sealed. He will still be able to produce future Uchihas even as a civilian, so that is of little concern, Hiruzen said, calming down after scaring the new counselor out of his mind. My daughter isn't insane, the older Haruno said loudly as she stood up and pointed at Kakashi. I don't care what that Cyclops says. Before anyone could say anything, the sound of a spinning chair was heard and Naruto was gone, only to fight him across the room with his mother's katana drawn from its sheath and his staff morphed into a full metal-bodied katana as he held them in a scissor formation under the older Haruno's throat. I think you should shut up, Haruno-san, or are you forgetting Hokage-sama's threat to mount your head as a warning to all other banshees? A threat I'd be happy to carry out for him and remove your head personally in order to shut you up for good, Naruto said with a sadistic smirk on his face. If Kakashi says your daughter is weak, and the facts say the same, she's a fangirl who is obsessed with dieting to look good for her precious Uchiha, which has caused her to slack off in her training and grow weaker than a 3-week-old kitten, and she has only you and herself to blame for that. Removing his blades, Naruto stepped back. She's your daughter, you pushed her to try and get the Uchiha's affections, and as a result she didn't train for her career as a kunoichi, which will result in her getting killed on her first serious mission if that doesn't change, he said as he sheathed his katana and stored both his weapons as he walked back to his seat. Regardless of my feeling towards both of them, they are fellow Konoha shinobi. And to see a fellow shinobi of the same village die because of their own stupidity is something that I or any Konoha shinobi want. If you value your daughters like Haruno-san, I'd suggest you push her to train more instead of dieting and looking for fashion tips in the latest magazine. Mebuki Haruno was left at a standstill at his words, unsure of how to respond. She disliked the boy and had followed what everyone else had said about him being a demon. But yet after the last meeting where he was able to show the actual Kyuubi and he were two different beings, she didn't know what to believe anymore. In truth, she had always suspected her daughter was having trouble at the academy in the physical aspects of it. She had been a chunin in her younger years, but when the Kyuubi attack happened she had been injured to such an extent that she had to retire, and to make it worse, her deadbeat of a husband had taken off when she retired after she'd gotten out of the hospital, not wanting to be with her anymore, her body scars proving to be too much for him, that and the fact he couldn't sponge off her shinobi career anymore. And at that moment in time, she was having flashes of the same thing happening to her daughter, or worse, because of her stupidity. She can't be that bad, can she? Mebuki said in a lower voice, one that got some looks of pity from those on the clan side and those who were shinobi and knew of her history. Hiruzen sighed. It looks that way, Mebuki-san. If she doesn't improve she will die on the first serious mission, but I will keep her back until she and the rest of her team are ready. Naruto sat down and sighed. Haruno-san, if you want, I know 5 skilled kunoichi who I'm sure would be able to assist your daughter when she's not training with her team. Something tells me that she will need all the help she can get, and Kakashi will need it also to break her out of her fangirl mindset. Mebuki looked at Naruto, unsure what to say. She hadn't expected such an offer, She knew she couldn't help her daughter after her injuries. She couldn't move like she used to and never would be able to. She knew Sakura would need all the help she could get her if she wanted her to live, so thankfully she bowed her head. "Thank you Uzumaki-sama," she spoke gratefully. Naruto let a small smile show for a moment and nodded his head in response. Hiruzen cleared his throat. "All right, if that is all we have to discuss, this meeting is adjourned." Scene break. Naruto and Anko arrived back in their apartment after the meeting had taken later than they had expected, and now both of them were exhausted after the day they had had. Walking in the door, Naruto unsealed his mother's sword from its seal and placed it on the rack like he always did, leaving his new staff in its seal, not wanting to leave it out as he and Anko walked to their bedroom. Naruto sealed his clothes into the seal on his arm and lay on the bed as he watched Anko undress herself, giving him a show while doing it, before getting into bed in only her panties and lying next to him. "So wanna tell me what you're planning for the howler monkey? I'd have thought you'd want to just let her get killed. A lot of people would thank you for it," Anko asked as she traced his muscles with her fingertip. Naruto sighed. "She's a Konoha shinobi, regardless if I hate her or not. I won't let a fellow shinobi die if I can help it, all because of her own inability to see the one she wants doesn't want her and never will. She's a teenage girl that's been sheltered her whole life who doesn't realize the seriousness of the career she's chosen. She's not either of us, and she needs all the help she can get." Anko smirked. "And you chose Sum-chan, Yugao-ne, Kura-chan, aka Chan, and little old me to drill it into her. That's a lot of help, but I'm sure we can do it. It's not as if you and me will have a lot of missions to do. Not with you being the one-man army, you could clear the village's backlog of D ranks in 2 days if you wanted to, and I will need something other to do when I'm not getting to know my student better." Naruto grinned. "I thought we got to know each other pretty well, but I don't see why we can't have some remedial lessons with my new sensei," he said before grinning as he pulled the covers over them both as Anko let out a squeal. The doors to Hiruzen's office opened with force as Hiruzen entered, a fire in his eyes that hadn't been seen in years. He strode to behind his desk and sat down as final 2/3 of the Elder Council entered the room. Kaharu was slightly pale due to recent events in the council chambers, and her fear showed as she looked at her former teammate who obviously didn't hold any favor to her anymore. Danzo, however, was eyeing Hiruzen with a watchful eye. It had been slow going over the past 4 years, but slowly his old friend had been getting his spark back, and in truth it was somewhat of a pleasing sight for the old war hawk, seeing that the will of fire still burned him. Although Danzo still knew Hiruzen was soft and was doubtful if he would do what needs to be done for the village's greatness and security, but even he had to admit he had never would have pegged Hiruzen to be the kind of man to sentence one of his former teammates to death and not even bat an eye. Recent events were starting to make the old warhawk watch his old friend with a lot of interest. Hiruzen's gaze flickered to both of them before settling on Kaharu as his secretary closed the door behind them. "Now, Kaharu, let's hear it. What in Kami-sama's name posed you, and out full of a teammate, to pass on crucial knowledge of how a jutsu was performed, that wasn't your own, to Sasuke Uchiha?" Hiruzen spoke with a heated tone, clearly not interested in wasting his time on trivial matters, which was true. If he'd had his way, he'd have both of his former teammates executed for their crimes, but then he'd have the Uchiha brat to deal with, and he'd be a worse headache than both of them. Or worse, he'd chose Danzo as his next clan voice in the council, and he did not need his old friend getting more power than he already had, on top of which would allow him access to the Uchiha Jutsu library, which could only spell trouble. Kaharu flinched under Hiruzen's tone, but steeled herself as she had all those years ago in her shinobi days before going into battle. "And why shouldn't we have?" Kaharu responded in her own tone. "Uchiha-sama came to us wanting more powerful jutsu, and Uzumaki offered the details up openly in the meeting minutes earlier. We gave him the details to appease him," she finished in a confident tone. only to regret it immediately after when a wave of killing intent washed over her that made her see her death 100 times over by the time the last sound left her mouth. Hiruzen slammed his hands on the solid oak desk with enough force to make it creak. So that's your answer. Because he asked for it. Hiruzen yelled, enraged by his former teammate's words. Doing her best to fight off the killing intent, Koharu gulped before speaking again. No. Not just that, it was to keep him happy, to assure he remained loyal to Konoha so that he doesn't leave and take the Sharingan and his clan's wealth with him. Such an act would cripple Konoha. Hearing that comment, Danzo growled in anger at their stupidity. So you're saying you did it for the good of Konoha? Rubbish. If the Uchiha wanted stronger jutsu, he needn't look any further than the Uchiha clan library. Danzo said, a scowl on his face. The Uchiha copied and recorded hundreds of jutsu during wartime which he has access to any time he wishes. A fact that I am personally uncomfortable, now more than ever, that his mental capacity has been called into question, which only condemns your decision to turn over such a jutsu even more. Danzo spat out. Such an individual with that amount of power at his fingertips is a serious security risk, and just to add fuel to the fire, you drop a jutsu that has the possibility to destroy the entire village into that individual's lap, regardless of the fact that he'd never be able to push it to that level. The last statement got Koharu's attention. What do you mean, never be able to? Danzo scowled. Uzumaki jutsu are dependent on the extreme chakra reserve of which the clan is known for, in order for them to reach their full potential. While the Uchiha clan has high fire affinities, it won't matter with their reserves. The boy will never be able to push it past a high B rank jutsu or even a weaker rank. A fact that was made clear when both Sasuke and Naruto performed the same jutsu for graduation and the Uchiha created a bonfire flame compared to the Uzumaki's towering inferno. If young Naruto is able to advance on all aspects of his clan, he will no doubt become an excellent shinobi. Hiruzen nodded. He will indeed, and he already had advanced other Uzumaki arts, and it was due to that fact that I was able to promote Chunin Anko Mitarashi to Tokubetsu Jonin. When I was informed that Naruto was finally able to remove my former student's curse mark, and if her presence and smirking in the council chambers was anything to go by, the result has been an astounding success. That sudden information caused Danzo to swerve, his one visible eye wide in shock. Although he quickly calmed himself before speaking, a process noticed by Hiruzen, he is able to remove a curse seal. That is very impressive. Did he by any chance disclose his methods of doing so, or record the inner workings of the mark? Either of such information would be invaluable to the village. Hiruzen narrowed his eyes on his old friend. No, he did not record any information on the curse mark, and any documentation of it has already been sealed away and will not be made open. And as for the methods of removal, it is now listed as a clan technique of the Uzumaki clan, and as such only Naruto may divulge it. Should it happen that anyone should become inflicted with the same curse mark, Naruto will be called to remove it promptly. Am I clear on this, Danzo? Hiruzen said, his stance on the subject obvious. The shock on Danzo's face faded to a neutral state as he bowed his head. Hi Hokage-sama, he replied while mentally screaming. The snake had been refusing to give him any information regarding the curse mark in their correspondences. The marks would have made his root Anbu even more powerful. He had been considering kidnapping the female snake charmer to study the mark in detail, but now with it removed, his final hope was lost, only furthering to anger the old war hawk further. You will pay for taking this power from me, Uzumaki, he mentally scowled. Hiruzen kept his gaze on Danzo for several seconds, not convinced by his neutral act at all. But he could do nothing until he crossed a line and was caught breaking one of his laws, and reluctantly looked back to Koharu. Now back to the matter of which we are here for. I am not entirely convinced with your reasonings behind why you and our former teammate deemed it fit to break shinobi law and assist in the theft of clan jutsu. However, seeing as Homura has been removed from the council and will be paying for his crimes, making you the last voice for the Uchiha clan in the council. Removing you without solid evidence of your treachery would violate the Uchiha clan's rights to have a voice on the council. But I warn you now, Kaharu, step out of line once more and I'll have you sent to Ibiki and Enko for a month, and I'd imagine Enko would be more than happy to enlighten you on the types of pain Naruto suffered when he was younger firsthand before I send you to join our ex-teammate in on death row. Am I understood? He said with a growl, releasing a burst of ki every breath, making Kaharu tremble under the constant bombardment. Hi-H Hokage-sama. The old crone struggled to get out under the pressure, only to be saved when the intercom from Hiruzen's secretary buzzed. Hokage-sama, Jonin Hitaki requests a moment of your time, spoke the voice over the small speakers. Hiruzen dissipated the pressure as he pushed the button to reply. Very well, send him in, was Hiruzen's reply before he looked to his old friend and old teammate. This meeting is finished, he said with a firm tone, leaving no room for argument as both elder counselors nodded in acceptance before leaving, passing Kakashi on the way out the door. Kakashi approached Hiruzen's desk as the man let out a heavy sigh, watching his old friend and teammate leave before looking to Kakashi. Ah, Kakashi, to what do I owe this unusual visit? I'd like to request to see the documentation and private file of my team's enigma. Sigh, Kakashi asked in a formal tone. He had decided against openly voicing his concerns about his third student in the council room for fear it might cause more disruption in the ranks as well as break the team apart further than it already is, and decided a subtle approach in private would be better. Hiruzen nodded, before reaching to the bottom left desk drawer and channeling chakra into the seal under the handle before pulling back to reveal it full of files. Flipping through them, he found the one Kakashi was looking for and took it out, before closing the drawer and resetting the seal as he turned and laid the file out on the desk. Here we are. May I ask what your concern is about this one? I would have thought you'd have been here asking for the files of Haruno and Uchiha, as they're the ones who you said needed the most work, with young Sai being the least. Kakashi nodded as Hiruzen opened the file. That's just the thing, Hokage-sama. He was almost too competent. During the test I spotted 3 occasions where I believe he was holding back so as not to reveal his true level of strength, letting blows hit he could have dodged, only attacking in obvious openings, and using advanced jutsu I've never seen, and I know the academy didn't teach him. Kakashi started to list off his worries. There's just something off about him, and with no listed last name strikes me as a problem as well. Hiruzen nodded. I see, Hiruzen said as he started to read the file's contents. I agree with your reasoning. He was a last-minute addition to his year, and according to all his reports he was an average student that didn't seem to progress any higher in his skills. However, one troubling note is that he is cited in his psych evaluation as being withdrawn and rather mechanical in his lines of thought and displays next to no emotion, which is somewhat unusual for his age. Kakashi nodded as everything matched up to what he saw in the test, although he appeared to have started to show some emotion, even if it was a dislike for his teammates. What about before the academy? Any family or connections? Hiruzen shook his head. No, he's listed an orphan, although it's listed he had a brother who passed away. That might explain his withdrawn emotional state, not wanting to have any connections to lose again. But I fear it may only be a contributing factor, Hiruzen said as his gaze turned to a scowl as he reached the bottom of the form before pointing. This is what is bothering me, his ward before joining the academy. It's Danzo. Kakashi's eyes narrowed. Danzo, I didn't think he would go this far. Emotional withdrawal. It would appear that Nei is still active. Hiruzen nodded, and getting bolder. Recruiting at younger ages and spying on this very office is off 4 years ago it would seem, but the question is, what is his objective in being on your team, Kakashi? Kakashi started thinking, it could be that passing wasn't his intent and he only did so by accident. Hiruzen shook his head. No, I don't think that is the case. If it were, he would have simply failed the exam and not bothered with team placements. No, something's telling me Danzo was expecting a different team placement. You did personally put in a request for Naruto to be on your team, so perhaps he believed that by passing there was a chance he'd be placed on your team with both Sasuke and Naruto. Kakashi's eyes widened. You believe his target is Naruto then, but why not just pull out when the teams didn't go the way that he believed they would? Hiruzen shook his head. It would have looked too suspicious, on top of which even without Naruto on your team there's still Sasuke to consider. He could also be a target. Both boys are last of their clans, and if he recruited either it would mean they would gain considerable funding as well as a large library of jutsu to add to their own. Kakashi paused for a moment and nodded. It makes sense. What are your orders on this matter, Hokage-sama? Hiruzen paused to think before slowly nodding. For now do nothing but observe. We need to know just what their plan is before we can do anything. However, continue as previously ordered and get both your other students up to par. Kakashi nodded before disappearing into a shunshin, leaving Hiruzen looking at the file on his desk with a scowl. Danzo, just how far into the muck have you fallen, recruiting children and doing this to them? He thought as he looked into the eyes of Sai's picture, seeing no light in them. It reminded him of the eyes similar to those Naruto had shown those 4 years ago. To take away a child's light, unforgivable. This village, Danzo, how far have we fallen from the Hashirama-sama's dream in order to allow this to happen? Hiruzen looked up to the 4 portraits of his predecessors and successor and frowned. Have we really failed? Have I failed? Hiruzen thought as he looked across his fellow Hokage's faces before stopping on Minato's and looking at the fire burning in his before a smile came to the aging Hokage's face. One of determination. No, I haven't. We haven't, he thought, standing up. The will of fire still burns strong in this village, inside the hearts of the young and inside the hearts of our shinobi. Inside the heart of your son. But against the coming storm he'll need to be ready. Hiruzen thought as he took down the picture of Minato, turning it around and looking at the seal on the back, and he'll need to start now. Scene break. Haruno household. Mebuki Haruno stood with a look of disappointment on her face as she looked around her daughter's bedroom. As soon as the meeting was over, she had taken her daughter home and removed her kit before placing her in bed, but as she'd decided to inspect her daughter's gear, like she had her own in her shinobi days, and what she had found appalled her. The kunai were chipped and old, shuriken were rusted, and there wasn't even a full set of either. Seeing them, she was confused. She knew Sakura had money to replace them. She was given an allowance every week and she knew the price of the tools hadn't changed. She could easily afford to get them replaced. But thinking on that note had made her wonder just what Sakura had been spending her allowance on, and so had started to inspect her room, and she was gobsmacked at what she'd found, the amount of beauty accessories. Girly magazines and civilian clothing she found was beyond belief. She'd remembered when she'd been a kunoichi she had maybe 7 sets of civilian clothing for when she was undercover or had extended leave. Compared to the 24 set of shinobi clothing, and makeup-wise she had maybe enough to fill a side pouch for the necessities only, maybe 2 shades of lipstick, eyeliner, maybe some light blush, all of which was unscented so she could wear some when on duty and not worry about enemy shinobi tracking her by its scent. Compared to the dozens of sets of civilian clothing Sakura had, and maybe only 3 sets of shinobi clothing, and an entire tabletop of makeups and perfumes, and 5 stacks of magazines waist-high, each of them civilian beauty magazines, there was nothing shinobi relevant at all. After looking around her daughter's room, Mebuki sat down in the desk chair with the realization that everything she'd been told was correct, that her daughter had neglected her shinobi training for her love interest, a fact that was made all too prominent when she had looked up to see an assortment of pictures of Sasuke on the ceiling above her daughter's bed. That had been the final straw for Mebuki. As she stood up and walked out, she knew if her daughter was going to improve she'd need help, but she couldn't do it if she didn't have the fundamental basics to get started, and she knew just the place to go. She still had a number of contacts in the village that she could go to. She'd make sure that her daughter had the right skills, or she'd back Lord Hokage fully on pulling her from the shinobi program. She would not lose her little girl because of her own inability to make sure she had been training. 2 hours later, Sakura Haruno awoke to find herself in her room lying on her bed with her shinobi tools sitting on her bedside table. She didn't know how she'd gotten home. The last thing she remembered Seisai Baka kicking Sasuke, and then before she could yell at him for it, she blacked out. As she went to get up she found her head spinning as she moved. Holding her head in pain she groaned, getting up and staggered towards the door, heading for their kitchen for a glass of water and some aspirin. Walking into the kitchen as she filled the glass and swallowed the pill, the front door opened. Sakura turned to see her mother coming in holding a large cardboard box that looked to be full and heavy. "What's in the box, Ka-chan?" Sakura asked, seeing her mother setting it down on the table. Mebuki looked at her daughter in shock to see her up already and smiled slightly, glad she wouldn't have to wait till she woke up. "Oh good, I'm glad you're up. We need to have a serious talk, Sakura," she said in a serious tone that made Sakura look at her mother with slight fear. The only time she'd used the tone was when she was younger and she'd done something wrong, which hadn't been often, which was why the tone was a shock now. "What's the matter, Ka-chan? Has something happened?" Sakura asked, not sure what was going on. Mebuki nodded. "Yes, something is very wrong, Sakura, and it's been going on over the past 4 years, only to an extent that I wasn't fully aware of, and I need to ask you some questions to find out the full extent. Please sit down," she said, gesturing to one of the table chairs. Sakura nodded as she was told, not sure exactly what her mother meant. Mebuki sat in the chair across the table from her daughter and crossed her arms. "Sakura, dear, I'm going to ask you some questions and I need you to answer each of them truthfully if we're going to fix this. All right?" Getting a nod in response, Mebuki continued. "Okay then, Sakura, over the past 4 years, outside of the academy, how often do you train on your own? And I don't mean book study, I mean physically train." Sakura blinked at the strange question. I guess not a lot really. I mean, I did all the physical stuff at the academy when we were told to. And I went over the taijutsu kata for a couple hours on the weekends, and I spent an hour every night reading the textbooks for the tests. That's about it." Mebuki frowned hearing her daughter's response. "A couple hours on the weekend doing just the katas? That's all you did? What about after class? Did you go for a walk or at lunch practice sparring with anyone to improve outside of class?" Sakura shook her head. No, I was always busy doing other things, like reading or talking with my friends. I didn't really think I needed to, and I passed my genin exam right." Mebuki frowned more as Sakura spoke. She really hadn't done anything other than the bare minimum, and looking at her, she could see now it showed. Sakura barely had any muscle on her body and as a result a poor figure, that looked borderline malnourished, that had brought another thought to her mind. "Sakura, when was the last time you weighed yourself?" Sakura paused for a second before replying. "Just last week. I think I was just over 37 kilo. Hearing that, Mebuki's eyes widened. That was seriously underweight for someone of Sakura's age and height. "Sakura, what do you eat on a daily basis for lunch?" Sakura brought her hand to her chin as she thought. "Well, not much, considering I'm still on my diet, but normally I have," Sakura started to say, but Mebuki spoke up. "Okay, stop, I've heard enough," Mebuki said as she held her head in her hands. This had only confirmed everything she'd been told, and it felt like a punch in the gut to know that she'd let this go on for so long, but that was stopping right now. "Sakura, do you want to truly be a kunoichi?" Sakura blinked at the sudden question. Yes I do," confused as to just why her mother asked her like that. Taking Sakura's hand, Mebuki nodded. "Good, now tell me why you want to. And be truthful, and really think about your reasoning. A shinobi life isn't a choice to make lightly, Sakura." Sakura paused as she thought about her reason for becoming a shinobi. The first reason that came to her was to be close to Sasuke. Another would have been because her friends were, but even she could tell that those sounded stupid. She knew a shinobi's life was dangerous, but she just didn't know why she wanted to be a kunoichi. Part of her wanted to when she was younger because it was cool. Another part wanted to say because she wanted to make her mother proud of her. Knowing she'd been one before she retired, that's hard to answer, Ka-chan. There are just so many reasons I've had for wanting to be one over the years, but never one definite one. Mebuki smiled, nodding. That's all right, Sakura, as long as you have an idea, but if that's the case, why haven't you done more to prepare for when you graduated? Just training in the academy isn't enough to prepare you for life as a shinobi. I'm sure each of your classmates who graduated beside you train rigorously outside of the academy, and I'm sure each of them have their reasons for wanting to be a shinobi also, Mebuki explained as Sakura listened to her. But I still passed the exam. I am a genin now, right? Sakura asked. Mebuki nodded. Yes, you are, but you only just passed, barely, and from what I heard from your Jonin sensei, you are nowhere near genin level in taijutsu and you only have the academy jutsu. Book smarts will only get you so far, dear. You need to train more, and eat properly, no more dieting. Sakura blinked, but if I don't diet I'll put on weight, and Sasuke. Sakura started to speak, but suddenly Mebuki smacked the table, making Sakura jump. Mebuki took a breath. Sakura, dear, I'm sorry, but what you're saying just doesn't make any sense. When I was a kunoichi I ate full meals every day and never dieted in my entire career as a shinobi, and do you know why? Sakura shook her head. Because I trained so much I burned the extra calories off and didn't gain any weight because of that fact. As a kunoichi you should never diet, it leads to a lack of energy which can be fatal if you're running from enemy shinobi or in the field when you need it the most. Mebuki explained, before taking a breath. Now, that leads to the second thing I want to talk to you about, your crush over Sasuke Uchiha. While in the academy I was supportive because I thought while you were fawning over him your marks at the academy were high and I didn't see anything wrong with it. But now that it's become obvious you've been neglecting your training over your obsession with him, on top of the reports on his attitude towards his fellow shinobi. Sakura blinked. What do you mean by his attitude? What's wrong with it? Mebuki frowned. From what I was told he is completely self-centered, and would attack his own comrades if they got in his way, and he even did so in your final genin exam. On top of his attitude problem as well as your serious lack of extra training, are the reasons your team has only been given a probationary pass by Lord Hokage, and if serious improvements are not made then the team will be disbanded and you'll both be removed from the shinobi program. Sakura sat forward. No, he can't do that. She started but stopped when she saw her mother giving her a stern glare. Sakura, he can and he will. And he will do so with my full support on this matter, Mebuki spoke, getting a look of shock and hurt from her daughter. Making her take her hands again in a way of apology before continuing. Sakura, try to understand, as things stand you are not physically fit to be going out on any kind of serious shinobi missions. While you may be book smart, that won't matter if a faster shinobi comes at you with a kunai and you don't have the speed to dodge or the energy due to dieting. And before you say that Sasuke will protect you, even if he was that kind of person, he won't be there all the time to do so. Sakura, I'm saying these things for two reasons, your own good, and the other is me being selfish because I don't want to lose my baby girl because of me not making sure you were ready. Sakura lowered her head, nodding in understanding. Okay, Ka-chan, I understand, but do I have to stop? She started but stopped when her mother sighed. Sakura, I know what you're going to ask, and I understand how you feel. You're young and you think that you're in love with Sasuke, and while I don't like his attitude, I'm not going to tell you to stop perusing his affections. But I hope you will listen to reason. As he is now, Sasuke isn't the type of boy that's worth your attention, and while I'm sure you are convinced you could change him, I'm not going to argue, but I am going to put a condition on your attempts to do so, Mebuki said, making Sakura frown. While she didn't like the idea, at least there was hope. Seeing this, Mebuki continued, given your currently physical state, before you can take on anything higher than a low D rank mission in the village, your team will be going through extra training to get you all up to Genin standards, while you will all be getting teamwork training as a way to better Sasuke's attitude. You will receive private training from 5 skilled kunoichi in order to get your skills up. Although I don't know who they are, they were recommended by Uzumaki-sama for this task. Sakura blinked, and Naruto recommended them, but why would he do that? He put that seal on me in the academy. We don't even like each other, and why are you calling him Uzumaki-sama? Mebuki nodded, while I'm sure you two have your differences. He doesn't want you to die. His exact words to me were, regardless of my feeling towards both of them, they are fellow Konoha shinobi, and to see a fellow shinobi of the same village die because of their own stupidity is something that I or any Konoha shinobi want. That is what a proper Konoha shinobi acts like. And as for why I call him that, in case you didn't hear, as of over a week ago now the Uzumaki clan has been officially restored in Konoha, with Naruto being the sole member, much like his Sasuke is the only member of the Uchiha clan, on top of which Naruto has shown himself to be a man of respect and restraint as of late in council and clan matters, as well as he recommended the kunoichi for your training. Now as to your conditioning, you will be allowed to pursue Sasuke, but only when you are cleared for your first C-rank mission, which hopefully will be in just over a month with all the training you will be receiving, Mebuki said, standing up. And to help you with your training, I went out and tapped all my old shinobi contacts and got you everything you will need, she said as she opened the box. Sakura got up and went over to the box, looking in, and her eyes widened seeing its contents, as her mother started taking the stuff out. I got you 30 kunai, and 60 shurikens, which you should be replacing every 3 weeks as the most, along with 5 sealing scrolls for when you eventually do go on missions outside of the village so you can pack accordingly, 5 sets of new shinobi gear which will protect you better than your current equipment, Mebuki said as she said it all out. Sakura looked over the clothing while protective was still stylish, and stuck to her favorite colors, only slightly darker. And the only major change was that of a light flak jacket that was a dark crimson pink, and some padding on her shorts with some protective gloves for her hands. Seeing her daughter was interested now, Mebuki continued, now I don't know the extent of what your instructors are going to be teaching you or the extent of what you've learned on your own, but reaching out to my connections in the academy, I was able to get copies of the academy taijutsu scrolls for you to review with them and help you fix any mistakes you've got and improve. After that, I'm sure they will be able to help you choosing your own style from the academy library. I also picked you up several other low-level jutsu for you to start learning, and some low-level offensive jutsu to try when your sensei thinks you're ready. Sakura looked amazed seeing all the scrolls. She'd read about some of these jutsu but had never started or even attempted to learn them. Ka-chan, this is too much. How much did all this cost? Mebuki shook her head. It doesn't matter. I had a few old favors to call in anyway. All that matters, Sakura, is that you take this time and get stronger and keep getting stronger. I don't want to lose my baby girl ever. Promise me, Sakura, that you will take this chance and get stronger and will be safe. Sakura nodded. I will, Ka-chan, I will, as the two of them hugged. A few days after the council meeting, with the matters now dealt with, everyone was turning their attentions back to happier matters, mainly the new reinstatement of the Uzumaki clan to the walls of Konoha, which had yet to be properly celebrated due to the fact the sole member had been whisked away for an entire week by a rather impatient Enko to have her way with him, or rather have him have his way with her. But that was now to be rectified as Sume had announced that she would be throwing a celebration party for the return of her best friend's clan. The entire clan was in agreement and was already in full swing of their own party while the guests were arriving for the private party in the clan head's house. Everyone was out the back in the garden area, having a relaxing and enjoyable time. There was plenty of food that had been donated and brought along by Choji's family, which was now laid out over 3 combined picnic tables. while another two had been put together where Soom had supplies enough drink to get them all pissed and to keep the hangover at bay until the next weekend. Everyone was having a good time, as it seemed that the majority of everyone was there, the younger generation and their parents included. The majority of them were all near the upper patio area with the large leather sofas set out under the awning at the back of the main house as they chatted and had some good time. As the party went on, Naruto was sitting back in one of the sofas off to the side, both Ino and Hinata with him cuddling into his sides as he hugged them. Naruto couldn't help but smile that everything was going so smoothly. He glanced over to see Soom, Hana and Anko laughing there off by the makeshift bar where they were filling shot glasses. Naruto had a feeling what was going to happen and smirked as he gave an anticipated chuckle before Akane's voice sounded in his head. "I'm ready, Naruto-sama," she spoke out, getting a mental nod from him as he looked to the two beauties on his arms. "Sorry you two, but I'm going to have to slip away for a moment. I've got another guest to welcome to the party," he said, giving them an apologetic smile. Both Hinata and Ino pouted after hearing that, but it also sparked Ino's curiosity. "Naruto-kun, are you going to welcome Akane?" Naruto nodded. "Yeah, she just told me she's ready to arrive and summoning her in the open might not be such a good idea as of yet, so I need to do so inside." Both girls nodded in understanding as they let him get up before Anko called on her way over. "Hey, where are you going? I've got the shots," she said, holding a server tray that was full to the brim with shot glasses with a number of different colored liquids. Naruto smirked. "Going to welcome the fifth member of our little circle. Be back shortly," he said as he walked up and gave her a quick kiss. Anko smirked. "All right, just hurry back or the three of us might have these all drunk by the time you get back," she said as he walked away, as the next thing Naruto heard was, "All right ladies, time to go shot for shot." Stepping inside the main house, Naruto quickly bit his thumb before cycling through the hand signs. "Kuchio's no jutsu, Kyubi," he called out as his hand touched the ground before the summoning array spread out and exploded into smoke, only to clear second later, revealing Akane standing wearing an elegant silver kimono with a black sash and white petals along the bottom of the sleeves. Naruto smiled. "You look beautiful, aka Chan," Naruto said as he took her hand and kissed it gently. Akane blushed at the compliment. "Arigato, Naruto-kun," she smiled back, as the two stood both smiling, remembering their date the night before, but their moment had been interrupted when a second summoning array expanded out from just across from the pair and another explosion of smoke caught their attention before it cleared, revealing a very small brown fox with a package on its back smiling up at the pair. "Hiko-kun," Akane said with a pleased smile seeing the small fox. "Akane-sama, it's so good to see you again," the small fox said as it hopped up and landed in Akane's arms and started licking her cheeks as Akane giggled and Naruto smiled. "Hey Hiko, what's up little buddy?" Naruto smirked as he petted the small fox's head. "Naruto-sama," Hiko said as he bowed in Akane's arms. Flashback the day after Naruto had signed the fox's summon contract. Naruto stood out in an open training field, Anko beside him as he bit his thumb and started to go through the hand signs for the summoning jutsu before slamming his hand down on the ground and called out, "Kuchio's no jutsu," for the first time. Naruto watched with curiosity as the summoning array spread out, his eyes instantly looking over the array with fascination as he was able to read the intricate array and tell it's working from a single glance, before it exploded into smoke the next second, only to fade away, revealing the small form of a small brown fox who blinked rapidly, find himself in a new place. "What the hell?" the small fox yipped. "What's going on? Where the hell am I?" It continued to yip as it looked around rapidly. Anko chuckled. "Cute little fella, isn't he? Couldn't you have summoned one bigger one?" she asked, looking at Naruto. Naruto shrugged. "I thought it would have been better to summon a small one first, so that way it won't attract the attention if I summoned one that could be seen above the treeline," he explained as he stood up. Hearing that, the small fox turned and looked at them and instantly went on guard. Who are you? Why and how did you bring me here? Talk. It snapped as it lowered its front to the ground, its claws ready and teeth bared. Anko raised an eyebrow at the small fox, threatening them. Feisty isn't he? Maybe we should dunk him in the river to cool him off first, Anko recommended with a smirk. Naruto shook his head. Behave yourself, Anko-chan. Last think I need it to piss off my contracted summons. The small fox's eyes widened. Summons? What are you talking about? The Fox clan hasn't had a summoner, ever, and the only one who can summon the contract to do so is Kyubi-sama. Where is she? Who are you? Answer my questions. Akane, who was watching the scene from inside Naruto, frowned. Naruto-sama, I think I recognize him. His name is Yoshiko, and I think I know the best way to calm him down. Akane proceeded to quickly inform Naruto of what to say. Naruto put up his hands in order to placate the small summon. Easy there, my name's Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. You have nothing to fear from me. What I said about being contracted to your clan is true. You see, I'm actually the Jinchuriki that Akane-chan is sealed inside. She was the one who allowed me to sign the contract. The small fox's eyes widened even more. Why you lie? Kyubi-sama would never allow herself to be sealed within the likes of you, and if it is, I demand you release her this instant. Naruto shook his head. Sorry, no can do. Once sealed inside me, our lives are linked, although I'm looking for a way to undo that, but if it helps, she's living quite comfortably now, he said as he knelt down to the small fox. If it'll convince you, she told me your name was Yoshiko, although you prefer Hiko. She also told me a rather funny story about you, something about a rather embarrassing incident with you in a rather large bush of nettles. Naruto said with a smirk, and Hiko's eyes widened, and that you ended up bathing in a mountain of baking soda after the fact. Hiko started jumping up and down rapidly. Okay, that's enough, I believe you, Hiko said as he stopped bouncing. I can't believe she told you about that, he mumbled to himself. Naruto smirked as he petted the small fox's head. Hey, I was only playing with ya. No need to be sad, she also told me you're a regular little trickster from what she can remember. Hiko smirked. Ooh yeah, I love pranking and they don't call me the den prankster for nothing. Naruto smirked. Well, they call me the prankster king of Konoha. Perhaps we could team up. I know of a couple of fools that could do with a good pranking. Hiko grinned. Oh, you're going to be a perfect summoner for the clan. I know a bunch of others in the clan who'd love to help. Any chance to prank, we take it, even funnier when it's outside of the clan. Anko smirked as she put her arm around Naruto's shoulder. Any chance I could get in on this pranking spree you two are planning? Naruto grinned. I don't see why not, the more the merrier. Now where do we start? Flashback end. The entire week after that, the village was hit with a pranking spree the likes of which it had never been seen, and Hirazen's paperwork and council meetings had gone increased to match. Each incident the council had tried to peg on Naruto, although each time Naruto had an alibi and the only reason they could say it was him was that a fox was spotted in the area, but was never caught as it always escaped. Pranks ranging from stink, paint and feather bombs were set off all over the village. Underwear was stolen and decorated tree lines, and the more unlucky of those that Naruto had targeted, such as the more annoying members of the civilian council and some rather irritating shopkeepers, had exploding shit bombs dropped in their letter boxes and their clothes sprayed with itching power. The village had never known such mayhem. It's been a while, Hiko, Naruto said with a smirk. A few weeks since you last visited. What brings you this time? Hiko moved his head as he started to undo the knot that fastened the package around his neck. I bring a gift from the clan in celebration of the Uzumaki clan's restoration in Konoha, he said as he finally unfastened the package. Taking the package, Naruto took out the small wooden box within as he handed the cloth wrap back to Hiko. Opening the box, Naruto's eyes blinked. There were a number of long white stuffed cylinders with both ends screwed shut. They looked to resemble the smoke Asuma was always smoking. Akane's eyes seemed to light up seeing them. Oh Hiko, are they what I think they are? She asked, getting a nod from Hiko. Naruto blinked, taking one out. What are these? If they're what I think they are, sorry but, I don't really smoke. Hiko chuckled as Akane smiled. They're not that type of smokes, Naruto-kun. They're the Fox Clan's special blend of certain herbs that can only be found in our den. Their effects can be quite pleasant for most. Naruto looked at the object in his hand. Maybe we could share them out. I don't think I'll be able to smoke them all myself. Akane smiled. I think that would be wise, Naruto-kun. Sharing the experience is always fun, and I haven't had one in ages. Oh, I do look forward to it. However, I don't recommend sharing them with the Akamichi clan. Sometimes the effects of the herbs can have a rather potent effect on those with large appetites, making them much larger for a time. Naruto smirked. I don't think that's even possible, but they'd just argue to try it anyway. Anyway, we should get back, otherwise Enko may have drunk both Ino and Hinata under the table in the past few minutes. Akane giggled. Okay, it was nice to see you again, Hiko-kun, she said as she set the small fox down. And you, Akane-sama, Hiko replied with a small bow of the head before he disappeared into smoke. Naruto quickly put the rolled-up cigarette back in the box and closed it as they made their way back out into the backyard of the house, only to see some more had arrived for the party. Hiruzen and the team's senseis had arrived and were starting to mingle. Hiruzen, seeing Naruto, had started to make his way over to him. Ah, Naruto, I was hoping to find you here, Hiruzen said as he came over with a smile, holding 2 scrolls in his right hand. Naruto smirked back. Well, it is a party to celebrate the Uzumaki clan's rebirth in Konoha. Would be a bit silly for the only Uzumaki in Konoha not to be here, Naruto said as he gave a little chuckle. What can I do for you, Gigi? Hiruzen chuckled back. Indeed, actually I was hoping to have a small discussion with you regarding a certain matter you helped me with in the past, as well as your future training, he said as his tone got a bit more serious. Naruto paused for a moment before nodding, getting what Hiruzen was referring to before giving Akane a kiss on the cheek and a promise to join them in a few moments as he gestured to his other 3 ladies. Akane nodded and kissed him back before going off to join the other girls, and Hiruzen and Naruto went back inside for a bit of privacy. Naruto sat down on one of the chairs and Hiruzen sat down opposite him with a rather weary look on his face. So Gigi, what is it you need to tell me about this old hawk? Naruto asked. Hiruzen sighed, reaching into his robes and taking out a white mask and handing it to Naruto, who looked at it, recognizing the plain white mask with the kanji for "nei" on its forehead, making Naruto look at Hiruzen with a raised eyebrow. The spy from 4 years ago in your office. What about it? Did you find out who he was spying for? Naruto asked. Hiruzen sighed and nodded. I already knew 4 years ago who he belonged to, and for over a year he was interrogated as Ibiki's personal assignment to pull any information from the man in order to bring his master up for the crimes he is believed of being involved in. Naruto crossed his arms. I thought you said you knew who his master was. Why not do it anyway? Hiruzen sighed. I know who he is because I personally authorized the unit. Naruto was a division of the Anbu that handled the darker assignments for the village. They operated with complete anonymity, however they went too far and I ordered them disbanded and their members retired due to the extreme training they went through to do their jobs. Well, obviously that didn't take, Naruto said with a frown. And what kind of extreme training are you talking about? Hiruzen frowned. The kind that is undergone since a young age to complete suppress all emotions to make them emotionless killers who do nothing but follow orders. It's what the man I put in charge of the program believed the perfect shinobi to be. Naruto scowled, his features hardened. And who was this twisted bastard you gave free roam to do this? Naruto spoke with vile disgust in his voice, directed at both the man in charge who did it and Hiruzen who allowed it to happen. Hiruzen gave a scowl back. I didn't know the extent of what was happening, and when I found out it was after they were disbanded, Hiruzen spoke with heated anger in his voice for the insinuation Naruto was making. Naruto's features didn't soften. You signed the order to allow it. Doesn't matter if you knew or not. You should have. Now we have this mess. Who did you sign off on? Hiruzen sighed, knowing Naruto was right. He should have kept a closer eye on his former friend, Danzo. Naruto's fists clenched. And why haven't you dealt with him by now? After that spy I pointed out in your office 4 years ago, Naruto said in a colder tone that Hiruzen remembered from that night. It was the tone that Naruto had when he dropped his mask, which he only used when he got serious on the heavier situation. Other times he'd just act normal, but it had grown slightly warmer over the 4 years. Something told Hiruzen he had Anko to thank for that fact. Hiruzen nodded a tired nod. The spy you helped to capture never broke when he was interrogated. It would seem no matter what we did to him, his training made it pointless, on top of which his master had taken precautions so that even if he did, he could never be implicated in anything. Naruto rubbed his brow from a headache he was getting before a thought came to mind: a seal. Naruto pondered. Hiruzen nodded, that and much more. To keep his man from talking, he had a seal on the bottom of his tongue linked to a mental jutsu in the man's mind like a dead man's switch. The seal prevented him from talking about his master to anyone but his master, and should he even try to fight it, the seal in his mind would activate, turning his mind to mush. Hiruzen sighed. On top of that, there was also a mental seal put in place to do the same should a Yamanaka attempt to gain access to the information by way of mind walk. We only found that out then Inoichi was brought in as a last resort. Had he not taken precautions that night, his mind would have turned to mush as the spies did moments after the seal had been breached. After that, an autopsy revealed several similar seals all over the man's body, preventing any physical form of information transference. It would seem Danzo has covered all his basics on the matter. Naruto sighed. Paranoid old bastard, isn't he? Doesn't even trust his own men. He's proving difficult to measure up. Hiruzen nodded. Indeed, but his precautions are well warranted, given that should one of his men betray one of his secrets, his entire operation could fall apart. Naruto nodded. Was there nothing that could connect him to the spy? Anything at all? Surely the root equipment and mask could be linked back to him and his organization. Hiruzen sighed. Nothing concrete that couldn't be easily explained away. The uniform and mask would never stick, given the fact that all root equipment was supposed to be brought back in and redistributed through the Shinobi forces where needed. Their old bases now used for storage purposes. He could insinuate it was a frame job, that someone was trying to frame him for such a stretch, but one that he could make work knowing him. Naruto sighed. Anyway, we could link the seals to him. Any connection at all? Hiruzen once again shook his head. There wasn't enough chakra in them to get a sample for a positive match on his, and even if there was, I don't think that he would have applied them himself. He would have someone else do it. Same with the seals in his mind. Inoichi suspects they were placed by a turned member of his own clan, but he didn't have enough time to identify the handiwork, so he's been on guard with his own clansmen trying to spot Danzo's man. So far nothing has come of it, and the only way to be sure would be to do a check of each of them for the seal, but doing so would put Danzo on alert and he'll likely dispose of the member before we could interrogate them. Naruto sat trying to think of something that they'd overlooked, something that they could use to get a foothold to start and bring Danzo's little house of cards down on him. They had no idea where their base was. The old base had been abandoned and was now used as storage instead of hold-on storage equipment. He has to be getting it from somewhere, so where would he? That's it, Naruto thought as he smirked. The equipment, his root use, they have to get it from somewhere. The weapons, the clothing, the white masks, all of it can be traced to a source. If we can find his suppliers, then we'll be able to link it to him. I'm sure one of them will have seen his face, and I highly doubt he'd have the balls to put seals on non-shinobi. Hiruzen nodded as a smile came to his face. Indeed, they would need to keep a large armory of weapons and supplies. I shall start with the weapons. I believe Daichi should be able to identify the craftsmanship on the ninjutsu the spy had. Perhaps he would be able to give us a lead, and if we can find out who made it, we can find out who purchased it, or maybe even where it was delivered and track it back to their base of operations and have it put on surveillance until we have the proof necessary to bring Danzo to heel. Naruto nodded. And what of those who follow him? Will they be crossed off or brought into the shinobi ranks again? Hiruzen sat back and sighed. Danzo's methods for training are drastic. They will need to undergo psych evaluations if they wish to rejoin the ranks. However, if they are like the spy we captured, they will most likely die before that happens. Naruto nodded his head as he frowned. Sigh, on Kakashi's team, is he? Naruto asked the open question. Hiruzen nodded his head. We suspect he is. Kakashi came to me the other day to voice his concerns. It was only then that we discovered that he had connections to Danzo. We believe he was a plant to watch you in the academy, and his new mission is to keep the Sharingan under thumb, although with Danzo it's difficult to say. Naruto nodded before sighing. Things are getting difficult. Do we know anything about his plans? Naruto asked. Hiruzen shook his head. No, that is what troubles me. Both his actions and intentions have always pushed for the betterment of the village. Although taking a darker route than I'd prefer to go often bloodier. He and my former apprentice often saw eye to eye on matters as such, one of the reasons I chose differently for my successor. Naruto's fists clenched. He has connections to the snake? Naruto asked with disgust in his voice. Hiruzen nodded. When he was in the village, yes. Now however I'm not sure. But his response when I informed him of Anko's curse mark being removed, leads me to believe he does. Naruto looked at Hiruzen with shock. You told him her curse mark is gone. If that gets back to Orochimaru then, Naruto said as he stood up in shock and anger. Hiruzen raised his hands to calm Naruto. Calm yourself. I did not inform him how it was removed, just that it was a precaution should he be in contact with my former apprentice. And in doing so I forced Danzo to tip his hand, even if for just a moment. It would seem he has interest in the curse mark, for whatever reason is not quite clear as of yet. Naruto sat down again, his worry still present but in understanding as to why Hiruzen would risk letting such information out. It forced moves to be made that they could prepare for. What are our next steps? Hiruzen leaned forward. We need to assume that the information will get back to my former student and he will attempt to find out as to how his mark was removed. There are only two ways that he might do so. One is by having Anko extracted from the village to acquire the information from her. The other would be through you, as it was you who removed the mark. As such, even though I know you are both capable of higher ranked missions, for the next month you will be limited to D-rank mission in the village for your own safety. You will each have an ambush squad watching over you in your home and your compound when its construction is underway, Hiruzen said as he reached into his robes taking out 2 scrolls. And in the month I think it would be wise if you prepared for the future. These I believe will prove most helpful. The next collection of Fuinjutsu scrolls, and something I believe it is time that you learned. Taking the scrolls, Naruto's eyes widened as he saw the encryption on the second one. And he looked to Hiruzen. I thought you said I wasn't ready. Hiruzen nodded. I did, and you aren't, but the seriousness of the threat dictates that you must be. You'll need every advantage that you can get, although you should master the other scrolls first before you attempt it. Naruto nodded as he put the scrolls away. I'll get started on them as soon as I get back after the party. Is that everything? Hiruzen nodded. Yes, that's. Hiruzen started to say before a voice interrupted him. Here you two are, Anko said coming in the door. Come on, everyone's waiting, and we can't have a party without the main guest, Anko said as she came over to Naruto's side. Naruto chuckled. I suppose you're right. Naruto agreed before looking back at Hiruzen. You staying for the fun, Gigi? Naruto asked. Hiruzen chuckled but shook his head. Sadly no, my boy. I must get back. Even with my clones taking care of the paperwork, there are still a number of matters that require my direct attention, but don't let me stop you from having your fun. Go on, I'll see you later. Naruto nodded before an idea came to his head. Sure thing, Gigi, just wait a moment first, he said as he opened the box Hiko had given him, taking out one of the rolled joints and holding it out to him. These were gifted to me by my summons. Akane-chan says they're a special mix of herbs that are for smoking, says the effects are quite pleasant. I was going to hand them out to everyone later to share, but since you won't be around, Naruto smirked. Hiruzen chuckled. All right my boy, thank you, I'll be sure to try it later, Hiruzen said, taking the rolled up joint. Perhaps I'll need it to relieve my stress after I finish attending to matters. This job can get stressful at times. The sooner you get stronger, the sooner I can hand you the hat like you always wanted. Naruto smirked. Until then Gigi just held onto it a little longer, he said as he got Enko on his arm as he made his way out. Hiruzen chuckled as Naruto walked out and watched the blonde go, making him smile knowing the fire was still burning bright as he stood up and made his way back to his office. Undisclosed location. Danzo sat behind his desk looking over several reports with a scowl on his face. With the removal of Orochimaru's curse mark from the village, he had lost one of his best chances at acquiring it without having more deals with the snake. In truth, Danzo despised the man. The only reason he worked with him was for the results his research had brought and might have still brought had the kidnappings not reached the Hokage's office. Danzo had tried to cover them up for the Sannin for a time to keep his research going undeterred. It was when the kidnapping of children had started that he couldn't keep it hidden any longer, especially with Hiruzen taking weekly visits to the orphanage to visit the Kyuubi container. He had hoped to be able to use the curse mark to increase the strength of his root shinobi. From what the notes he had managed to gather from the snake's lab detailed, the mark was meant to allow those who had it to access a large reserve of chakra and increased their physical capabilities beyond what the norm were capable of. As well as binding them to him, making them totally obedient. Enko's mark may have been defective, but it would have given them a start on acquiring the mark without Orochimaru's assistance had they reverse engineered its workings. Granted, this did reveal a flaw in its design. It could be removed by someone other than the one who'd applied it, something Danzo was sure that Orochimaru would be interested to find out. But for now he planned to keep it to himself. Giving away such vital information wasn't in his nature, and the snake had done him no favors. It would be an extra card in his hand should he have negotiations with him again in the near future and play it if needed for a deal to be made. For now he would just have to bide his time and scowl over the loss of his possible future plans. But if there was anything a good strategist knew to do was to have a backup plan. He may have lost his advantage but gained another for negotiations, and opportunities always presented themselves to those who waited. He would get his curse mark one way or the other. Naruto groaned as he lay on the ground, not sure what was going on. His head was killing him like someone had put it in a vice and squeezed hard. He tried to move his hand to block the sunlight but found that he couldn't move his arms due to the weight on them in his chest. That was when he decided to finally open his eyes to see what was going on. When he did, he was greeted with a sight most men aren't lucky enough to see in their lifetimes other than their dreams and porno movies. On his left was Hinata. On his right was Ino, and lying on his chest was Anko. He was currently shirtless, and from what he could feel so was Anko. He could also feel skin contact on his arms, but couldn't see much due to the blanket that was covering their bodies as they lay on the grass outside the back of the Inuzuka main house. Naruto screwed his eyes shut, trying desperately to remember how he was in this position, yet the last thing he remembered was lighting up the end of the joints the Fox clan had given them after sharing them all out among the other guests. After that he couldn't remember a thing. Opening his eyes again, Naruto tried to see where everyone else was, an act that didn't take long as the others were all sprawled out through the back patio of the house and the backyard in varying positions. Over by the makeshift buffet table, where both Choji and his father were both shirtless at either end of the table, every plate cleared of food and both Akamichi covered in food stains. Naruto could even make out a few bite marks on the table itself on both ends. Turning his glance to the drinks bar, Naruto had to blink twice. Behind it was a 10-meter tall stack of tables and chairs piled high with drink bottles scattered throughout. At its peak was the sprawled-out body of a passed-out Kiba with an empty sake bottle in his hand. Shirtless also, but his shirt was tied around his head bandana style. At the bottom of the bar was where Naruto's eyes landed next, and for good reason. Lying on top of the bar was both Sum and Hana, both only in their lower underwear with what looked like chocolate sauce and whipped cream on various parts, a fact that made Naruto blink as he had the same on some parts of his arms and the taste in his mouth, quickly putting it to the back of his mind for the moment Naruto started looking around to find others. Looking to one side of the porch, Naruto could make out both Shikamaru and his old man both slumped to the ground, drink bottles all around them and a shogi board between them. But compared to the other side of the patio, Naruto could barely hold his laughter. On the patio swing set was both Inoichi and Hiyashi, both only in their boxers and were cuddling. To the left of the scene in the hot tub, Naruto could see Kakashi sitting to the side of it, leaning on the edge with his little orange book in his hand outside of the water. One thing that Naruto had found strange about it was that he still had his mask on. Under the tree next to the house, Shino and his father slept beneath the tree, a number of bottles around them and lying off to the side of everyone like Naruto and the girls were Asuma and Kurenai. Asuma was shirtless and the pair had a blanket over them, and Naruto could make out a bra just a bit away from them. Naruto groaned as he let his head back down and rested on the ground as a thought went through his head: what happened last night? Time skip half an hour later. After half an hour of pulling himself from beneath the girls, Naruto had managed to rouse everyone from their sleep, now redressed and each with pounding headaches as they sat or leaned around the Inuzuka kitchen and living room with the shades drawn to keep the light out. There was a theme going around with everyone that none of them could actually remember what had happened the night before. Inoichi and Hiyashi were on opposite ends of the kitchen, both with large cups of coffee like everyone else, both not daring to make eye contact with the other as the general silence continued until Kiba, who was lying on one of the sofas with his hood over his eyes to keep the light out, groaned in pain. "Ah, Naruto, where the did you get that shit?" Naruto, who was sitting on the ground using the back of the sofa as a backrest with his knees up, shook his head with his eyes closed. "Never again. I should have known it was going to be like this. Never accept gifts from your summons, especially if they like to play jokes," he groaned, keeping his eyes shut. "I thought the smokes were meant to make you relax, so why am I feeling like this?" Naruto mentally groaned to Akane. "The herbs do make you relax. When you take them and for a while afterwards, it's not the herbs that are doing this, it's the amount you drank last night that is. 21 shots of the strong stuff combined with fox herbs don't mix well. So is it the herbs or the hangover that's giving us the amnesia?" Naruto mentally asked as quietly as possible to keep his head from hurting any more than it already did. "It's possible it's the herbs," Akane shrugged in the mindscape. "As far as I know, the fox herbs have never been used by humans, but I didn't think it would have affected you as much as it did. I know fox herbs are about 5 times stronger than their cousins that are grown in the human world, but to have affected you this much." Naruto mentally blinked. "Wait, are you saying you remember what happened last night?" Akane mentally giggled. "Oh yes, Naruto-kun. Every juicy little bit, and I have to say it was quite a remarkable evening for everyone, especially you and a few others." Akane finished, leaving it there. Naruto mentally groaned. "Well, are you going to tell me or not? I think the others would like to know what exactly they did last night," Naruto asked after waiting a few moments for her to continue. Akane giggled. "Not. The amnesia will likely wear off in time and you'll all start remembering. And it's likely that some actually do already, they just don't want to come out with the embarrassments that happened, so the rest of you can remember on your own. I'm just going to wait till certain people remember exactly what happened. It will be very obvious when they do," Akane replied, still giggling. Naruto mentally groaned. Sometimes I forget how much of a prankster you foxes can be. He mentally groaned as he got to his feet before speaking. Alright guys, Akane-chan says that the amnesia should wear off in time, and we'll just have to wait for it to do its thing until then. Sume, who was in her large armchair, head in one hand and a large mug of coffee in the other, groaned. Did she know the stuff would do this to us after, or is this just a bad joke? 'Cause if it is, it's not funny. Naruto shook his head. No, it's not the herbs that are making us feel like this. It's your booze that we all drank. Akane-chan remembers last night and apparently we all drank like fish. And it's the combination of both that make us feel like this and have screwed without memories of last night. But that's all she's saying, says we gotta remember on our own. Kiba groaned on the sofa. So you're telling me this is a hangover? Damn, I must have drunk a lot to feel like this much shit. Shino, who was over in the corner, nodded in agreement. Agreed Kiba-san, the few of my swarm that remember bits say you had at least 5 bottles of sake before you started the construction of the tower outside. Sume looked to Kiba. Well, you built it so you can take it down, she said with a groan as her head pounded. Kiba groaned in agreement. Fine Ka-san, but can it wait till my eyes stop burning and the ground to stop spinning? Naruto took another drink of his coffee as he walked over to Anko, who was leaning against the wall, her eyes closed and her head down with a cup of coffee in her hand, letting out a low moan of unpleasantness as she stood with Hinata and Ino to her right, both in similar states. Naruto leant against the wall between the three with Hinata and Ino on his right and Anko on his left as the three instinctively leaned into him as he stood there taking another sip. Well, Akane-chan did let slip it was a rather eventful night for most, but wouldn't say who, Naruto said openly, getting a groaning response from most. Hayashi and Inoichi both took sips of their coffee before speaking. Naruto, I think it would be best if we all remembered in our own times given the state the majority of us were found in, Hayashi spoke in a stoic tone. Inoichi nodded. Indeed, such facts should also be kept to themselves given how embarrassing they might be. The fact that the majority of us were in our underwear speaks for itself. Sume scoffed painfully from her seat. Yeah, right, and the fact that the pair of you two were cuddling in only your skivvies on my back porch, I might add. Hayashi rubbed his closed eyes. Please keep such statements to yourself, Sume. Inoichi nodded. Exactly, such situations are exactly why the events of last night should be kept to themselves, regardless of who remembers first, Inoichi said as he took a long drink of his coffee. Hana, who had been in the same position as Naruto at the side of her mother's chair, groaned in agreement. Besides Ka-san, we weren't in much better condition, she said aloud. Besides, I can still taste the whipped cream, and I can feel the chocolate sauce elsewhere as well, the thought shivering slightly. Sume groaned. Fine then, she said, repositioning her hand to keep what little light there was out of her eyes. As the silence resettled in over the rooms, there was a knock heard at the front door, getting a groaning response from the occupants of the room. Not wanting to move, Hinata activated her Byakugan to see who it was and she gasped in response. It's an Anbu at the door, she spoke, getting looks from the others. Naruto thought for a moment before nodding as he realized what it was likely about. It's all right, that'll likely be for me. Gigi will want to see me, he said as he pushed off the wall, downing the last of his coffee before giving each of his girls a quick kiss and a see you later before heading for the door. Walking out, her was greeted by the sight of Yugao in her Anbu gear and Neko mask with her sword strapped to her back. Naruto, Yugao addressed him as he came out. The Hokage had requested your presence in his office as soon as possible, she said in her official tone, while Naruto knew she was smirking behind her mask. Naruto nodded. Hi Neko-chan, let's get going, but if you don't mind could we just walk for a bit? Last night was a rather long night and my head is spinning, he said in a slightly pleading tone. Yugao smirked. Sorry Naruto, but he did say as soon as possible, was all she said before putting her hand on his shoulder as they disappeared into a shunshin. Scene break. In the Hokage's office, Hiruzen sat behind his desk, shades pulled with his hat off, eyes closed and a bag of ice on his head as he groaned in discomfort. Only to open one eye as Neiko and Naruto arrived by Shunshin. Naruto immediately doubled over, holding his head with one hand and the other on his knee, keeping him upright. I will get you this, Neiko-chan. Naruto groaned as the spinning increased yet again with the fast movement. Yugao chuckled under her mask before disappearing in a Shunshin as Naruto stumbled to the awaiting chair in front of the Hokage desk. Sitting down with a groan, Naruto leant back before looking to Hiruzen and gave a small smirk. I take it you tried it then. Hiruzen set the bag of ice off his head, and nodded slowly as he sat up the same way, not wanting to move too fast. I think that is evident enough given my state. I've been like this for the past hour after falling asleep on one of my office sofas last night at some point. I can't even remember half of what happened after I took some, and what I do remember is a blur. Naruto nodded. Well then you're half as well off as everyone at the party. It was so good none of us remember anything after we started. I woke up under 3 beautiful women, while everyone else was dotted about the place in varying situations that I've been asked not to repeat. Hiruzen nodded. Perhaps that's for the best right now. Part of me wants to know what happened last night and the other doesn't. Naruto nodded before he looked around the room and then to Hiruzen. What I would like to know is why you have a genjutsu covering your office. Hiruzen looked to him for a minute before sighing as he made a half-ram sign and dispelled the genjutsu in a puff of smoke. The sight made Naruto blink repeatedly. The entire room, from one end to another in every nook and cranny, was painted orange with bright multicolored polka dots, making Naruto rub his eyes to make sure he wasn't seeing things as Hiruzen spoke. The main reason I want to remember is so I can figure out where I managed to get all this paint to do this. Naruto blinked, looking around. Trippy, you going to keep it like this, Gigi? It would certainly make for a fun story and joke. Hiruzen sighed as he reapplied the genjutsu as rubbed his eyes of the 100th time that past hour. No, I won't be keeping it. I'll have some Anbu clean it up and restore everything after we're done here. Naruto nodded. Fair enough. Speaking of which, is this what I think it's about, Gigi, the compound? Hiruzen nodded. Indeed, I finished filing the last of the paperwork last night to make it official with the fire daimyo. Everything is set and we can begin the compound's construction anytime now. Naruto nodded. Excellent, and I think I know exactly where to put it, Naruto said as he got up and took out one of the maps of the village from the side of the desk and unfurled it before pointing to the location. Here, 300 meters to the east of the Inuzuka compound. There's a large expanse of forest land there, and the 300 meters will give plenty of breathing room. We'll need to clear it with Sume before we start clearing, given it's so close to the compound, but I imagine she shouldn't have any problem with it, Naruto explained. Hiruzen nodded. I see. Well, given that we know where, we just need to plot out how much land needs to be cleared. The trees can be used for the compound's construction after the walls have been put up and the boundaries are placed. A pathway and road will have to be put from the entrance to the rest of the village, Hiruzen said as he took a brush and ink as he started to mark down the easiest spots where this might be. The initial size of the compound should be at least 100 square meters. Any increase in size after the fact and you will have to apply for planning permission and the likes to extend, so it's best to overbuild and plan for the future. Naruto nodded. Better go for 200 square meters then to be on the safe side, extending to the north and east towards the village, to make the path and road to the rest of the village shorter, and clear the trees in 50-meter area to the southeast of the compound in case we make changes, Naruto said as he took the second brush and started marking in the area. Hiruzen checked over the areas and nodded. All the further area is village property, so you'll just have to purchase it after Sume gives the go-ahead for the build, Hiruzen said before he took a sheet of paper and started writing out a letter before folding it and snapping his fingers twice as two Anbu appeared. One wore a hawk mask with a red stripe and the other wore a Neko mask similar to Yugao except it had green and red markings as to Yugao's with 3 red ones. Hiruzen held out the letter to the hawk mask Anbu. Deliver this to Sum and await her reply. Please request for it to be as soon as possible, he said as the Anbu took the letter and disappeared in a shunshin. Hiruzen then looked to the second Anbu. Tenzo, remove your mask and please join our conversation, Hiruzen ordered as the Anbu nodded, removing his mask. The man had short brown hair and black, almond-shaped eyes, wearing the standard Anbu attire consisting of a black, sleeveless jumper under a gray flak jacket with strapped-up shinobi sandals, arm-length gloves with guards over them. He carried a sword strapped to his back and his Anbu tattoo was on his left shoulder. He wore a neck warmer up over his neck covering the bottom of his chin and his face was framed by his gray Hapuri-style forehead protector. Clearing his throat as Tenzo did as he ordered, Hiruzen spoke again. Naruto, this is Tenzo. He will be the one clearing your compound area and setting up the temporary outer walls while the main headhouse is completed. Naruto and Tenzo shook hands. It's a pleasure to meet you, Tenzo-san. Tenzo nodded. Likewise, Naruto-san. Once word gets back, I should have the area you mapped out cleared in a few hours. After I rest a bit, I should have the temporary walls up by the end of the day. I hope that's expectable. Naruto nodded. Perfect, but if you don't mind me asking, how do you plan on putting up all the walls by yourself, a jutsu? Tenzo smirked as he held his hand out and much to Naruto's shock something began to grow out of his palm and take shape as a small white flower sprouted before Naruto, who could see the base was wooden that connected the palm and the flower as Naruto realized what he was seeing. Mokuton, wood released, Naruto said in disbelief. I thought that was unique only to the Shodai Hokage. Naruto asked in shock as he looked at the flower in curiosity, as the gears in his head turned and new ideas came to life. Hiruzen nodded. It was, but Tenzo, here was the outcome of one of my former students' experiments, Hiruzen said with a sigh. He was testing to see if it was possible to pass on Kekkei Genkei to other bloodlines through scientific methods. As you can see, it was a success, Hiruzen said before looking down, but it came at a great cost. Naruto nodded in understanding. I see, was Naruto's response as a thought came to him. What if it didn't have to? What if? Naruto started to think only to smirk as he had found his next project. Well, arigato for the assistance, Tenzo-san. Naruto said as he looked at the time. Now if you'll both excuse me, I've got my sensei to meet at the collection hall to start my missions for the day. I'll check in on the compound area around 6 to see how things are going, Tenzo-san. Naruto said as he moved to the door, just before Hiruzen spoke up. Oh Naruto, I was just wondering something. It would be possible to get more of those herbs from your summons. From what I remember, their effects are pleasant. It would seem I just took too much, Hiruzen chuckled. Naruto blinked before chuckling. Sure thing, Gigi, I'll see what I can do. I'll keep you posted. Naruto laughed as he opened the door and headed out. Tenzo looked at Hiruzen. Herbs, sir? He asked in confusion. Hiruzen cleared his throat with a cough. Oh yes, I believe Naruto best described them when he said the effects can be trippy. Scene break. Walking into the missions hall, there was a row of desks in front of the windows with 3 chunin sitting behind it with boxes filled with scrolls on each. As Naruto entered the room, he came across Enko waiting for him with a dango stick in her mouth and a small paper bag filled with bare dango sticks, evident that she'd been waiting a while. Naruto could see she was still feeling the effects of the herbs and drinking at the party. Given by how she had her head tilted away from the bright light from the window, the hangover was being a bitch. Naruto smirked, thinking of a way to cheer her up as he walked over and smirked when an idea came to him as he thought of a few ways that he could do it that they would both enjoy, but decided that screwing her brains out on the first mission day might not be the best way to start off their first day that they were meant to be on the clock, and so decided to appeal to one of her more fundamental instincts. Hey Enko-chan, Naruto said as he came up to her with a smile on his face as Anko groaned in response. Please Naruto-kun, not so loud, my head is still spinning from those herbs, Anko complained. Naruto shook his head, really, I thought it was all those shots we had on top of the herbs, he smirked, speaking in a lower voice. Anko shrugged, okay, it may have been that too, she said before she noticed he was still smirking. What's got you in such a good mood, aka Chan blow you again or something? I thought I told you to invite me next time, Anko smirked. Naruto chuckled, no but next time we will be. No I'm just smiling because as soon give the go ahead, which should be any minute now, the Uzumaki Clan compound will officially be under construction, 300 meters east of the Inuzuka compound, Naruto smiled. Well it's about bloody time, Anko said with a smirk, why hasn't it been organized before now? Naruto chuckled, well I was kind of preoccupied with pushing the paperwork for the past week, remember, he said with a smirk. Oh yes I definitely remember, Anko said with a sly smirk, before moving to Naruto's front and putting her arms around his neck, but I think it would be best if you remind me, what were we preoccupied doing again? She said as she leaned in only for Naruto to do so as well as he took her in passionate kisses. She pressed her body against his, grinding off him much to her pleasure. Wearing only a mess suit had its perks. But to her dislike he broke the kiss early, but she had her fun as she gently bit his lower lip as they broke apart, pulling it slightly before letting go as she pouted, hey what's the deal, you're not going soft on me? She asked before cupping his crotch through his pants and smirking. Nope definitely not soft, she said with a smirk. Naruto smirked. No just being professional, it is our team's first day and all. And besides, he said before gesturing to the 3 chunin behind the desks gawking, I'm not all that into having others watching. I prefer to have you all to myself, Naruto said as his hand snakes behind her and grabbed her, making gasp with pleasure, only for their attention to be drawn by a crash as they looked to see all 3 chunin passed out with blood trickling from their noses. Anko smirked, well that did it, she said before turning back to Naruto, now where were we? She said with a seductive smirk before trying to restart their kiss, only to be blocked by Naruto's index finger. We were about to go and collect our mission, Naruto said in a, nice try, tone before smirking. Professional first day, remember, he said with a smirk. Anko took her arms away from around his neck and huffed, you're no fun now that you're a shinobi, you know that. She teased. Naruto shrugged, we've had plenty of fun for the last week than most men get to have in a year. I think we can last the next 12 hours without screwing like rabbits, now come on, he said as he urged her onto the mission's desk. With a final huff Anko gave in. Fine, well at least we can pick a good mission. I know you can hack it, so where do you wanna go for your first mission? She asked, looking at the A and B rank missions. Naruto shook his head, sorry Anko but we're on inner village missions for the next month, with Anbu surveillance, Gigi's order, Naruto said as he gestured to the ceiling above them only for one of the slabs to move and Yugao in her Anbu gear to wave down at them before replacing the slab. What? Why? Anko said in irritation at being stuck in the village another month, the old man knows you've got the skill, so why's he benching us? Naruto sighed, he's laid out a small trap letting some info slip to someone to test a theory, and we're the bait if the info is leaked, so we're giving it a month to see if the trap springs, but just as a precaution we're not to leave the village and we've got Anbu on us an hour flat and compound until the month is up. Anko groaned, great just great, and what is this info that the old man has leaked? The only major thing that's happened has been. Anko started before her eyes went wide as her hand immediately shot to her neck and she looked at Naruto with slight fear. My mark, he thinks he's found a spy of those snakes doesn't he? Anko asked in disgust. Naruto nodded, in a way, he suspects there's a connection, and let the fact that it's been removed slip, but not how it was removed. I'd rather he hadn't, but what's done is done, now all we have to do is wait. Naruto shook his head. Nope, we train, and do missions, shitty ones but still missions for now. And besides, Naruto said before he lifted a bundle of D-rank mission scrolls, I've got something fun for us to do afterwards. Anko smirked. Oh, and does that maybe include us, screwing like rabbits, as you put it so well, she asked as she followed him. Naruto chuckled. Well, I can imagine someone is going to be screwed, but you'll just gonna have to wait and see, he said as they walked out of the hall and headed down to the front of the tower. Scene break. Naruto and Anko walked out of the tower before Naruto dropped all the scrolls on the ground and then made the cross sign before calling out, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, as the area in front of them was filled with smoke as over 30 Bunshin stood in attention. Alright, listen up, it's mission time, in groups of 3 pick a scroll and get to work, Naruto ordered before gesturing to his headband. There are 60 chakra storage seals in the vault dimension storage connect to each of our headbands. Use them if you're going to run low on chakra before the mission is done, and when your mission is done, fill out the report and seal it into the vault dimension before dispelling so I know it's done. Got it? He ordered. The clone gave a resounding yosh before the first 10 came forward picking up the scroll before the clone broke off in their squads. Anko smirked. This, sensei thing, is easier than the others make it out to be. 10 missions on the first day. I think we're going to set a record, Anko said in a laughing tone, remembering how she'd been told by other shinobi how boring it was to take on a genin squad. Well, none of them ever had Naruto as their only genin. Naruto smirked. Well, I think it's time to show you what I have in mind for what we can do while we wait for them to be done. I'm just hoping old Scarface hasn't started yet. If he has, there may just be nothing left for us, he said before wrapping his arms around Anko as they both disappeared into a flaming crimson shunshin. So friends, this was episode 5 of this epic and powerful story. If you enjoyed it and want episode 6 soon, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Also comment down your thoughts. Do you think Naruto's true Uzumaki powers will eventually surpass every legendary shinobi who came before him? I'll see you in the next episode.